Hi guys, and welcome to our USUK Star Wars special. Now, we recorded these bits of audio over a year ago now with the great and powerful Erik Pflueger. Now, if you're Garmy-centric, Kevin Smith-centric, you'll know who Erik Pflueger is. Not only is he a fantastic artist, world-renowned artist, he is a fantastic guy behind the microphone, and not only that, he's got a vast knowledge in Star Wars lore. So when we decided to put these together, I was overwhelmed with joy that we got to do this with Erik, because he really is brilliant. Of course, these bits of audio were too good to throw away. When we moved over from Thorskin to USUK, I always said I was going to bring these bits of audio over, and here they are. Volume 1 is going to be very much covering the prequels. The prequels, I think, are misunderstood. As I'm recording this now in 2021, we've had movies that have been released since then that have probably made people go back to the prequels and gone, oh, you know what? These actually aren't too bad, you know. Listen to what Erik says about these, because he may change your mind on a few aspects of these films. Tom Bruno does join us, but his laptop PC does die throughout this and through the next volume of episodes too, because this was a time in our lives where Tom wasn't having much luck with his PCs and whatnot. So listen, I hope you enjoy this. I would love to hear your comments. Make sure you can message us via email, usukglobal@gmail.com. You can just hit us up on Facebook. You know, that's the way people tend to do it now. I hope you enjoy this. Take it away, Alex, Erik, and Tom. Peace out. So today we've got a very special guest with us, a world-renowned artist, a good friend of the show, and good friend of everybody that's Garmy-centric, I guess, and that is the wonderful Erik Pflueger. Thank you very much for joining us, Erik.
Oh, thank you so much. World-renowned, my hinder. I'm just a guy that draws and colors for a living.
I have one of your... Oh, it's in my car now, actually, because I'm going to get it framed. But I have a piece of your artwork with me here in Shrewsbury. If that isn't world-renowned, I wouldn't know. I don't know what it is.
I'll grant it technically qualifies, but modesty keeps me going, nope.
You sound fantastic as well, Erik. Thank you, Tom, for running that microphone down to Erik so we could do this. We've been trying to plan this for a while now, haven't we?
I'd like to second that. This is a wonderful microphone. Hopefully it's working out for you guys. It sounds good on your ends. It's certainly better than the previous time I came on the show when we were working via telephone more than anything.
Sounds amazing. And honestly, I like this concept. I hope one day that you get a better microphone yourself, because I mean the Snowball's perfect, don't get me wrong, but there's always a better setup. Like I got a better microphone, Alex got a better microphone. That's why the Yeti's or the Snowball's making its rounds. And I hope it gets passed off. So it's like the sisterhood of traveling microphone essentially. And we all have like a little memory with this thing.
A little orange ball of love.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my nickname in high school.
It's like a sword that passes from generation to generation.
Exactly.
That's right.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, we are here for a reason today, and that one reason is Star Wars.
The world.
We're going to take over the world. It's Star Wars. We're going to do a
The same thing we do every night.
Oh, that's good too. God damn, that's good. For anyone that does not honestly know this, because I didn't know this about Erik until he dropped some on me really hard one day, and he does a lot of really good impressions, and they seem to be all black men. So I get really I get very inquisitive.
I just did a white mouse doing Orson Welles.
Yes, but isn't the dude who does Pinky's or Brain's voice black?
No, neither of them.
Neither of them. Oh,
Brain is Rob Paulson, isn't it?
Is he?
Well, he's Pinky.
Yeah.
Maurice LaMarche is the Brain, because Maurice LaMarche has kind of made a secondary career of doing Orson Welles, particularly young period Orson Welles.
See, it's very funny. I bet you we were having a conversation last night, a pre-Star Wars conversation, and Orson Welles came up in that as well, because he was supposed to be the original Darth Vader. Is that correct? You were saying that last
At the
night?
very least, he was being considered. Was the worry that his voice was actually too familiar by that point? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, so,
I can't help but wonder what that would have sounded like, and I can't do late period Orson Welles in order to do it justice. I just wish I could.
He's the guy that did the War of the Worlds radio
yes.
The original 1938 Mercury Theater broadcast of
which
War of the Worlds. He did
sent the whole world crazy. Everybody was like jumping off buildings and shit, like, oh, the aliens are coming, because everybody thought it was a real invasion. That's amazing, right?
Part of my family lore says that we actually own a little bit of the land on which that invasion was supposed to have happened. I'm told by my mother, I believe, who heard it from a person, she was born in 1938, so don't expect her to have witnessed stuff. But I'm told that they just looked out the window and after hearing this broadcast and going, there's nothing here. I don't know what the big deal is about.
Oh my God,
what's this Wells dude going on about?
Turn that crap off. Okay, so I want to give a big shout out before we get into this, because once we get into this, there's no coming back. Big shout out to Ed Crane, who is a local guy. Found out he makes his own mead locally, and I was like, hey man, I want to buy a bottle of your mead, and he was like, don't give me any money, just give me a review. And he came round my house earlier and dropped me off 2 bottles of mead. Look at that, how cool is that? What a guy.
That's fancy. So that means you're sending one of those bottles to your podcasting partner.
I don't think this cork would stick in the bottle in the post, but I'll drink one for you. It's called Shrewsbury Mead, which is awesome, by the way. Ooh. And this batch is actually called the Honey Trap, which I know we're not doing the original trilogy, but obviously it's a trap. We're doing Star Wars. It's a trap. So, cheers, everybody. I'm going to crack into this mead, and I'll talk bits about it during this thing. So today we're going to be talking about the prequels. We've got to start somewhere. Do you think it's right that we're starting at the sequels, or do you think people are going to get annoyed that because they like to do it in the traditional way of starting at episode 4?
Well, that's not really the traditional. I mean, it's traditional in the sense that it's like, oh, that's how they might have originally saw it. But if you want to go, by the numbers, if possible, then yeah, you got to start off with 1, 2, and 3. Plus, it's good to discuss these first because they're a little more complex than the other ones, right?
For me, of a certain generation, yeah. For you, the classic ones came first, and for a while, we were comfortable with that. Then came the prequels, yep. And for a while, we tried to reconcile the two with different orders of watching these films. The episodes 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and 6 way of looking at it. But that only held up until there was a sequel trilogy. Now you have to look at them as
sequential,
as repeating bits. You have to start with 1 now.
See, it's funny because like when they first came out, Eric, you saw these movies as they came out as a kid, I'm going to guess.
Well, I'm 47 or 1972. I would have been 5 for episode 4, what's now called episode 4.
Yeah.
Let me see, 6 and 8 for episode 5. 11 maybe for episode 6. You're slightly younger than me, Tom, so episode 6 was your first. Alex, you could jump in on where you were.
86 I was born, so yeah. But that wasn't the first one I watched. So the first one I watched was... No, I did. Like Star Wars, I was a late bloomer for Star Wars for me. I kind of didn't really... It was like one of those things that was always on at Christmas. It was always on a boring Sunday when I didn't have anything else to do. So it's only when I started like properly watching them and enjoying the characters and their arcs and getting in with the politics of all these things that I really started to enjoy them, and especially Anakin's development. Anakin's development is pretty phenomenal. I love it.
I luckily got to see 4, 5, and 6 in the theaters because if you guys remember, they had Star Wars remastered. Not when they started adding in digital characters, but the first go around, they remastered all of them and they set them in the theaters. And I actually got to go and see Star Wars the way that you should see Star Wars in the fucking theater, which was awesome. And it's funny though because like this happened before. It happened with a movie called Grease, where I was aware that Star Wars was a thing prior to it coming out. I knew it was being re-released. But when Grease first came out, when they remastered and put it back in the theaters, like back in the 90s, I did not know that Grease had already come out. So when I went to my cousin's house and she had a copy of Grease, it blew my fucking mind because I thought she was some sort of like pirater or something that could get video VHSs out of the theater. It's like, how'd you get Grease? And she's like, oh, that's been out for like 30 years, Tom. I'm like, oh, all right.
Oh god! But this okay. So we went from this amazing trilogy that's legendary now, and then they released the prequels, and Star Wars Episode 1. We'll start off with did not get the best reception at all. I really liked it. What is everyone's perceptions on this? What do you think of Star Wars Episode 1? Is Eric still
Wow.
there? Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm very much here. The thing is that what impressions we had back then, I think, are less important now. We need to approach this, if we're going to approach the whole, from the perspective of an ideal viewer who is looking at all of these in sequence and has them available at their beck and call to pop in and watch right then and there if they wanted. Because that's probably going to be the way that this is ultimately viewed in terms of perception, as a complete whole work. A work that is only going to be complete when Episode 9 has rolled its last frame.
Yeah, I feel that.
I saw it in the theaters, and luckily I was of an age where, Star Wars was still very magical. So I always have that to draw on when I watch Episode 1. I'm like, oh, you really loved it as a child. So later on in life, when I was starting to become a little like judgy, and I was like, Jar Jar, I was like, dude, don't be like that, because you loved it when you were a kid. The only thing that changed is other people's perception of the movie, not yours. So I get that to draw on, which is nice.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it, as I've always have. I mean, that pod racing scene for me is one of the most epic scenes in movie history. Like, okay, so we'll go over what happens in Star Wars Episode 1 for those who maybe haven't watched it for a while. If you're going to listen to Shane, yeah. So it starts off on with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon on a ship. They want to was it to escort
No, they were going to meet up with the ambassadors for diplomatic reasons.
That's right,
a deal.
Yes, they were going to make a deal, and that's where.
Well, what happened is
go.
that the film. What happened is that the film begins in medias res, the way all of these films do. It starts right in the middle of a crisis that has been building for at least a month, in which the Trade Federation says, "Hey, why are you suddenly taxing our business when we've been going through business in the Outer Rim for the past century without being taxed? What's that all about?"
Yeah.
We blazed most of these hyperspace trails you're trying to tax us, and we actually put our guys at risk doing it.
Yeah.
What's this taxing horseshit? So as a matter of protest, with a little bit of bad advice from you-know-who, the Trade Federation throws a bunch of warships around Naboo because they say, hey, this Senator Palpatine was one of the guys who proposed the taxes to begin with. They obviously don't know that they're the same person. There's a lot of acting going on.
Yes, of course, and that's one of the most beautiful things is you've got Palpatine being two different kinds of asshole. You've got the politician that's putting up these taxes for one reason or other, and then you got the Emperor.
Yeah. And we'll get to the specifics of Palpatine as a character and Sidious as a character, and the way me and McDiarmid approach the performance fairly soon enough. But suffice it to say, the Federation is like, we'll starve Naboo if you don't reconsider these taxes.
The most evil of all plans.
It fell to the old canon to kind of fill in the blanks with a lot of this. You like to mention the Darth Plagueis novel that James Luceno wrote. even for it being old canon, you can't recommend that book strongly enough if you really want to contextualize the politics in this.
Oh, 100%. That's actually one of the things that made this movie far more interesting to me than anything else, is because I understood who Darth Plagueis was. I understood like why he was important, how he trained Palpatine, because it's a huge part of the story that, Palpatine kind of wants to be like, obviously the big bad, but he wants to be the big bad as like mainly a fighter, and he has other ambitions. But then Darth Plagueis is really like a guiding part to like keep him level, so he can do this political assassination, if you were, for all these people. And he was very, very effective with it. He was a great what's the word I'm looking for? He was really great at lying to people's faces and making them believe one thing when he was really planning another. And the plans got really deep in that. It was yeah.
Well, the book goes into detail about the motivations and the psychology of the Sith in general, which the films unfortunately just don't have the room to go into.
Mm-hmm.
Even at it's like 6 hours film time, maybe 7 if you stretch.
Yeah.
But the book goes into it in considerable detail. Obviously, the Sith were defeated 1,000 years ago. And by the way, I need to contextualize this entire affair in terms of cycles of people paying for the mistakes of previous characters in previous cycles. The prequel trilogy is ultimately about the characters they're in, dealing with the consequences of events that happened 1,000 years ago during the last Sith War.
Yeah, and these are holes that definitely need to be like for the casual Star Wars fan. That should, I think, if they're going to start making new properties with Star Wars, they should go back and explain to people.
Absolutely, because this book had like really important things like the introduction of Darth Maul, the introduction to what number 2. Don't rag on me for not thinking about it. Was
Dooku?
Yeah, Dooku, Count Dooku. It was his introduction where he kind of disbarred from the Jedi Council and started doing his own thing, and like how he got corrupted. And it has like a lot of people that are integral to these episodes that would bear a better backstory than what they got in the movies.
And there's really nothing in new canon to discount what happened in the book, except for the Darth Maul stuff. The way Sidious got hold of him was revealed to be somewhat different and a bit more interesting. But apart from that, there's nothing in the broad strokes of that novel, or even in old canon in general,
also
that is too overwritten.
Also, it's pretty impressive because it really does set up the fact that it almost gives you foresight for Darth Vader killing Emperor Palpatine in the very end of Return of the Jedi, because it's really discussed very heavily in that book about how it's almost tradition for a Sith apprentice to kill the master so they can become the master. That's what almost every other Sith did prior to this. It's one of the first things they talk about when Plagueis kills his master, and it sets up for the future. So then you kind of should be able to be like, oh, eventually Darth Vader is going to kill Palpatine, because even if it's not for the right reasons, it's going to be so he can be the big bad fucking Sith.
Yes, in fact, can we look at that aspect of things, without which a lot of what goes on in the prequels is difficult to wrap your head around if you're not engrossed in the deep lore. The Sith begin 1,000 years ago at the conclusion of the last war going, okay, outright conquest didn't really work because the Sith fell to infighting among themselves, and the ones that survived that got knocked off by the Jedi. The Republic is reestablished after a century of horrid warfare. The Jedi become more entrenched into the Republic government than ever before, and the Sith go into hiding. And one guy, Darth Bane, says, listen, the Sith fell to infighting because there were too damn many of us. We need to get one master, one apprentice, going down in a lineage where the master takes the apprentice, changes the apprentice into something like himself, advances the agenda forward once each generation a little bit, And then the apprentice becomes the next master, chooses another apprentice, and on for 30 generations of masters. From Darth Bane to a number of God knows who's, then to Darth Tenebrous, then to Darth Plagueis, then to Darth Sidious. The culmination of this lineage, the 30th one in it. And all this time, these Sith have been working behind the scenes, taking their notes right out of like Sergei Nechayev's Revolutionaries Catechism, working to undermine the system by infiltrating all social formations, the police, commerce, even crime organizations. And no Sith Lord ever knowing for sure that their work is honestly going to lead to the fulfillment of the grand dream, the revenge of the Sith, wiping out those Jedi buttholes, root and stem.
It's always important to wipe those Jedi buttholes.
Just completely pulling the Jedi Order out, root and branch, and replacing it with their own rule, not representative rule as embodied in the Republic, which they see as weak, not order brought from the bottom up, but order imposed from the top down. Because that's how they see their role. They say that power denied is power wasted.
Which is why I guess they explain that any kind of exposure to a Sith is dangerous because they're so good at taking something good, infiltrating it and exploiting it, and then turning it into something dark and so a tool, almost like a tool for them.
Yeah, 100%. The apprentice, the Siths are the best at making cat paws of everyone. They want you to do something for them without that you even realizing it wasn't your idea to do so, and that actually plays really heavily in this book as well. I find it very interesting that Darth Plagueis was the first one that wanted to, the way that it usually works is that the master gets so old that the apprentice can, take him out, and that's how it works. So Plagueis' whole deal was he wanted to live forever, and he wanted to make a way to do so. So it shows how greedy and how where his aspirations lied in this whole thing. So I feel like that really kind of made the Emperor, who Palpatine, the apprentice, kind of transformed that certain way as well, which really speaks to how he was so driven for the top, because that's what Plagueis is doing,
I love that you described the cyclic aspect of it, apprentice murdering master and becoming master. That's to me, that evokes something I'm sure Lucas was exposed to. I'll try to go into a very brief. There's this book, The Golden Bough, which was the 19th century equivalent of Joseph Campbell's work by Sir James George Frazer. And the framing narrative in this book about mythology and religion is about an old priest who guards a tree with a golden bough hanging from it in northern Italy, if I'm not mistaken, at Nemi. And his job is to stand in front of that tree, in front of that bough, and protect it with a sword until such time as he is bested by a quicker or a craftier or a stronger or a better. And that then must become the king in the previous king's place until he is murdered by a faster, quicker, stronger, better, and on and on.
And from there came the Italian mafia.
Well, not necessarily. In fact, what came from it is Apocalypse Now. We know for a fact that Coppola was exposed to that book through his friend Dennis Jacob, and considering that Lucas was a younger brother type of friend to Francis Coppola, I'd say the indications are that he almost certainly saw it. Certainly he'd seen it by 1999 when he was working on the prequels.
Wow. It's a very strong message, isn't it? So this is a bit of backstory as to why things are playing out in episode 1. And if you can kind of forgive people for going, we don't know what's going on. No. All this nonsense about episode 1, and people haven't read these books. Can we forgive people like that, or do you think it would make people's view on the film a lot better if they just went back and read those books?
Well, the fact is that the Darth Plagueis novel, and we can touch upon this once before we get buried in it, because it's that good a novel that you can get buried in discussion of it. Yes. It came out because Lucas had made the decision to start converting the Star Wars films to 3D, and the first one that was going to come out was Phantom Menace. Now, in order to kind of justify the re-release of Phantom Menace, he came out with a bunch of stuff to help, I guess, spackle in what some had perceived to be holes in the narrative. The Darth Plagueis novel came out as part of that push. A lot of what happened in the Clone Wars for a couple of seasons also was an attempt to kind of answer questions about stuff that happened in the prequels that the prequels didn't have time to get into, like Order 66, how the disappearing after you die trick happens. How did the economics of this stuff work? What all of this stuff that the film simply couldn't get buried in, or you just become a bunch of prattling butts like we are. The series had time to go into.
It's almost like the respiratory system behind the flesh. Yeah, it kind of the innards. The innards. There you go.
The guts.
The guts.
And if I really had to answer your question, Alex, I would say that no, you don't need these things absolutely in order to just sit back and have a 2-hour film watching experience with pretty high grade, visually exciting sci-fi. No, just contextualize it. That's all.
That being said, if you have the time to actually go like grab Audible and grab the audiobook of this, it's definitely worth taking a listen to on like your free time and just to get a little more Star Wars. I mean, everyone wants a little more Star Wars, right? Especially good Star Wars. And this is what that story is. It's good Star Wars.
Yeah.
It does represent the very best of the old canon.
Yes.
Okay, so they're on a ship. They are trying to negotiate a peace treaty with the
what are those guys' names? The Viceroy, the Viceroy.
They hear from the Emperor. Was it the Emperor? Or was it from Palpatine? It was from the Emperor. Wasn't it?
Well, he's Palpatine right now. He's not the Emperor yet.
And they were like, "We're going to land our troops on this planet," and they're like, "Is that legal?" And he's like, just fucking do it. Just do it.
I will make it legal.
Yes, that's right. And the straight away, the Jedis are treated with hostility. They're locked in a room, and they try to poison the Jedis, which, of course, a Jedi is going to survive that. And there's that beautiful scene where the doors open and you just get the lightsabers light up, and you can't see the Jedi. They're just behind those beautiful glowing lightsabers. And there's a corridor full of droids. I
like the protocol droid that walks out. She's like, "Oh, excuse me."
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I love the green lightsaber, by the way. If I'm just going to get into it, automatically Qui-Gon wins it for me because I was always a huge fan of Luke's green lightsaber in Return of the Jedi.
Yes. And if we were to look at it from a certain perspective, Luke getting a green lightsaber can be read as representing Luke kind of going back to a certain Qui-Gon method of looking at the Jedi and their way of looking at things.
Yeah, because, I mean, well, that's also, if you really want to dig into it like that, all stones mean something else, right? That's the reason that they're different colors. They have different meanings, and they give you different, well, not abilities. That was a video game thing, but they're supposed to mean something. That's why they come in different colors. Unless you're Samuel L. Jackson, who gets a purple lightsaber because you want to be Samuel L. Jackson.
But isn't that supposed to mean power? Isn't the purple one supposed to be power?
Well,
I think we're about the wrong franchise and the wrong stones.
No. It's actually a thing. Keep going on about it. I'll look it up really quick.
So,
well, the thing is that the real important thing for an audience to know is what goes on at the macro level. Unfortunately, the film doesn't spell it out at the macro level. You're kind of meant to comprehend it after the fact. Kind of in the same way that you're meant to comprehend after the fact that, oh, the real story you've been watching is the moral decline and fall of Daenerys Targaryen. Okay. But you only realize that when you're at the last frame. And so in this case, in episode 1, it's, the greater story in episode 1 is that everyone's being hoodwinked by a kind of show crisis into being stressed out into electing Palpatine Chancellor.
Yes, and that plays out for a while. Did any of you guys kind of guess? Was it too hard? Was it too obvious? He's hiding in plain sight throughout the whole thing. Did anybody of you think, that's the Emperor straight away?
Well, having the benefit of seeing the other 3 films, I knew it from the very beginning. Mostly because it seemed illogical for it to be anything more complicated than this is Palpatine and he's pretending to be Sidious, or more accurately, Palpatine regards Sidious as his actual real person, and he regards Sheev Palpatine as the Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay. Update really quick.
Yep.
So a green lightsaber, what it means is it means peace through force when necessary. The red means evil and power. The blue means justice and protection. The purple means moral ambiguity. I'm a little high.
But you're correct about the use of color theory in this. And really, if apart from the whole deep lore about why this crystal is this color and this crystal is that color in universe, it's meant more of a psychological thing for the audience.
Well, with the exception,
the bad guys have red, orange, warm, hot colors. The good guys' saber colors are blue, green, cool colors. Even the purple sort of counts as a cool color.
Yeah, but the thing is that the red crystals, especially for the villains of the piece, the Sith, the reason that their crystals are red to begin with is because they're corrupted kyber crystals. They have to do something evil with it to make it that way, and that's where they draw their power from, not the regular pure kyber crystals.
And then they get a blade color they call bloodshine, which is accurate.
Which I guess is like an SS uniform, isn't it? That's like
the
sign of a Sith.
Well, if you want to talk about the use of historical uniforms in this, that's another discussion and another really good design level discussion.
Yeah, and they love bringing up dog food.
Well, in fact, in the classic trilogy, one of the Mollo brothers was one of the costume designers, Andrew Mollo, and he and his brother John kind of wrote the book on SS uniforms, what's regarded as the definitive text even today.
Wow. Okay, so let's get back to the film, because they escape to Naboo after shit hits the fan in the starship. When they get to Naboo, they save Jar Jar from being killed, and so Jar Jar we get introduced to. Fans of Jar Jar, you guys?
What's that term they have for when somebody saves somebody's life and they basically your slave from that point on? They have a term for it.
He's got a life debt?
Yeah, sure. We'll say that. He essentially has a life debt to Qui-Gon Jinn. And so he's like, I'm just going to follow you around the rest of this time because you're the man. You know what? Once again, as a kid, I loved Jar Jar. I thought he was interesting. I thought he was just silly. So he's whatever. I have not a bigger problem with Jar Jar later on. I just, I don't feel like that's where his story arc should have went, but that's neither here nor there.
I think it's generally down to the outpour of hate. That's why they never really ventured into his arc that much. But obviously, him introducing Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to the Gungan leader leads to obviously the development between the Gungans, kind of stepping up and trying to protect their planet. It's a big step. It's like it was meant to happen. Do you reckon Qui-Gon kind of knew that this character was important?
I bet you anything that, of course, they would go to that. They'd be like, of course, he had he had feelings that this person would be important to their mission and to the overall peace of the galaxy. So that kind of probably led him intuitionally towards saving this dude. But also, you could also just say it's because the Jedis don't want anyone to die and they feel that all life is precious. So even if it's saving this silly, long-necked, dinosaur-looking dude.
But it's meant really to depict Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon hasn't been given anywhere near the justice he's due. His character is due. More books have been written about them since, but nowhere near enough. For one thing, Qui-Gon picking up Jar Jar is a great way of setting the table for why Qui-Gon would then also want to pick up a boy only a month shy of 10.
Yeah, but to be totally fair, though, Anakin actually had some force about him. He had a great feeling about him. Jar Jar, on the other hand, he just kind of saw him in distress, so he saved him.
But what links them is the fact that Qui-Gon is a very instinctual creature.
Yes.
Why does he keep picking these stray dogs up off the side of the road? Partly compassion, partly because of what he senses about him, partly because what his instincts tell him. He says that to Anakin: think, don't feel. Use your feel, don't think user instincts. He's a feeling creature, and what he feels, senses about either Jar Jar or Anakin or probably Obi-Wan at the time came to pick an apprentice, if that's how it's done.
They discussed that in the Darth Plagueis book as well, right? They talked about
no, but they did have a whole young adult series of books about that very subject, about how they met and how Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon became apprentices. And while it's probably not still canon in the current era, there's no reason the broad strokes of it can't be.
Yeah. So they meet up with the Gungan Emperor there, and the Gungan Emperor basically is like, "Hey guys, He doesn't want to help them, or he does. I can't remember. See, I watched this on TBS.
Played by Brian Blessed in a role that I will always love Brian Blessed for, doing what Brian Blessed always does, which is just completely consuming the scenery around him and swallowing it whole and spitting out the bones like an owl.
He used to scare me as a kid, but he's looking back at Brian Blessed now. He's such a fucking talented actor. If you have a voice like that, fucking use it. Damn right, use it.
Gordon's alive.
Amazing. So they use what, the tunnels to get up to the to save the princess, essentially, or the queen.
About that, people who want to complain about the sequel trilogy not observing physics, i.e. Carrie Poppins, need to look at this film as being the film where tossing physics out the window in favor of space opera Flash Gordon physics is made real clear. Because this planet doesn't have a molten core like Earth does. It's nothing but sponge with watery passageways going through it. That says the deep lore. I swear to God it says it.
God damn. Well, see, I can kind of like back up the TLJ of it all, but we'll get to that when we actually get to the movie itself. But I have a good theory about that.
We have to keep in mind, as I'll stress constantly through this, that these films are mostly in line with modern cosmology and physics, but only to a point, in the sense that it's adhering to serial Flash Gordon takes on science. And you have to keep in mind that those serials were written by people who knew little about science for an audience that cared even less.
I'm about to say, these movies were written for, kids. We got to remember that it was, don't get me wrong, it's not like adults aren't supposed to enjoy it, but these movies were, like most movies that are rated G or PG, they're meant for children of a certain age. And that's who they gave it to. So if they take a little bit of liberties with the physics of it all, you got to excuse that, because a kid's not going to sit there and be like, wait a minute, the revolution of that ship does not match the gravitational pull of that planet. Shit like that.
Precisely. In other words, Star Trek is where you have questions about, does this or does this not, in fact, adhere to physics as we understand it? With Star Wars, that was never the concern, and probably ought not be. And certainly it shouldn't be crucified for deviating from understood physics.
The emphasis was more on the fantasy, wasn't it? More on the fantasy and the physics kind of behind the politics. They were looking more on them sort of, and the history behind all the characters as well. So yeah,
well, in the sense that, yes, Game of Thrones is in the end the story about politics, but nobody questions the physics of dragons.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so they rescue Amidala, Padme. You first introduced to her, and they end up going to Tatooine because her ship's damaged. They go to get the part, which is where they first meet Anakin in the shop.
And by the way, I love the character that's the owner of Anakin. I always thought he was one of the greatest things. Fuck, I don't take credits, only money. Oh, it's fucking good, man.
He's Londo.
Wando. Which is
if you really want to do Watto, you have to do your Londo Mollari from Babylon 5 as a kind of practice run. Oh, Mr. Garibaldi!
He's a great character.
And then you're ready for your Watto. Utmians! Dikimi Hasachobo Nabuti Nanoya!
What? You think he's some sort of Jedi with the mind? It doesn't work on me. What is he? He's not Kydarian. Is he Kydarian? What race is he? He says it.
Toydarian, what he is another violation of physics, because there's no way that boy should stay afloat.
Hey, how do you know the gravitational fucking pull and like the actual force field?
Eric,
like,
you nearly killed me, man. I laughed so much I nearly coughed to death. Fucking that was brilliant. Brilliant.
That's what you sounded like right there.
There's a lot of funny voices in this film. The problem is, I think we just weren't ready for that much funny. We were expecting it to be a bit more like something out of Suetonius meets Edward Gibbon meets Frank Herbert. But we didn't get that.
What does everyone think about 3PO being built by Anakin, like, right off the bat? He's just like, bam, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
The thing is, you see a lot of these service droids already. I mean, we got introduced to one at the beginning of the movie. So, and he's on this deserted desert planet. Is it one that he's found and he's just put together? Because, like, there's no way he came up with that design without knowing what a service droid looked like.
No, and like they could have done something a little bit simpler, right? And they could have taken a different droid and then at the very end be like, oh, I'll switch out his brain for this droid and give it to what would be 3PO or something that you could tie it in that way.
I think it was more a way to showcase his ability at making things.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Absolutely. He's the smartest.
Yeah.
Player.
By the way, one thing that links a lot of characters in this saga is that a lot of them are good at A, fixing things, and B, driving and or flying. Because Lucas himself was these things. He was a race car driver in his teens, only got out of it and got serious about his life because in his 18th year, he got in a car wreck.
Oh, so that definitely is what plays into, what was that movie that he did prior to this?
Well, notice then, if you want to talk about how biography plays into a person's art, Anakin is good at fixing things and flying things. Luke is good at fixing things and flying things. Rey is good at fixing things and flying things. According to Darth Plagueis, Palpatine is good at flying things and raised himself.
Yeah, and so
a lot of these characters are races.
Yeah, man, that's very true. Yeah. Well,
now, Star Wars, I guess, all that means, how significant is it? Probably not all that much. It just means that Star Wars is really interesting to watch if you're good at picking out patterns.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
So after they meet up with Anakin for the first time and they discuss the fact that they don't have the money for it, right? They're like, oh shit, we need money to be able to get this part. And they decide that they're going to put the ship up for, I mean, I know it's a little bit deeper of a discussion than this, but they essentially decide they're going to take the ship and put it up as a, what's that word?
Pink slips.
Pink slips. Yeah. They're going to put up pink slips for the ship and offer that as, what they're putting up for the bill. And he doesn't want to accept it at first, right? He had to throw something else in.
There was it was a bet, wasn't it, on the pod race?
Yeah, it was a bet on the pod.
The Plinkett video complains endlessly about how elaborate the betting is in this act of the film, and I have to concede the point.
Well, it's important that children learn how to bet properly, is all I'm saying. This really sets it up so you can be a degenerate gambler when you hit 20.
Well, for one thing, cheat, because Qui-Gon cheated by moving the dice.
It's true.
He did, yeah.
You want this small toss, Outlander, but you won't win the race.
Do you think he knew? Did you think Qui-Gon has an ability to kind of almost see small bits into the future? Because he knew he was adamant that Anakin was going to win that race.
No, I think that's his instincts kicking in again. I mean, if anybody's going to have the accusation of being able to see in the future, you figure it's Palpatine.
Yeah. But no, it's got Qui-Gon all over it because it's probably that he didn't know, but he absolutely had that feeling. He's like, no, I believe in the boy, and the boy is going to do what I think he's going to do.
Do you reckon he would have beaten him to death?
It's like the same way your mother knows your child is sick. You just know.
Yeah,
I guess. Okay, so then they go back to his house, don't they? They go back to Anakin's house.
In a house that seems way too comfy for a slave's quarters.
It's so true. It's a really nice pad. Fucking, it's definitely not a one-room flat. They're like, oh, there's the boudoir over there, and there's the walk-in, and fucking, it's pretty well set up. 2 stories.
It's very much the Tatooine aesthetic, to be sure. It fits in with what Tatooine's supposed to look like, no question.
And shit had 2 layers of a veranda on there. I mean, come on, they're not doing too bad.
And then they have one of the most important conversations in the whole.
Kid has his own room.
He does, yeah. He shouldn't have. He should be living in a hovel. Anyway, but back to the conversation. Qui-Gon has a conversation with Anakin's mom, and he's like, "Where's his father?" And she's like, "It was immaculate conception." and then just carry on with it. It's like this guy, this.
Yeah, sure,
this kid
Alex.
is
That's
Jesus.
exactly what she says. That's what's in the script.
Yeah, basically what she said.
Exactly. She's like, listen, nobody fucked me, Qui-Gon. I got this baby from magic.
There was no father. And to be frank, if this series is willing to do virgin births, I think that by the end of the sequel trilogy, we'll find it's willing to do the other end of the Messiah plot spectrum too. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
I thought you were going to say that they should crucify Darth Vader at the very end of it. They should just put him up on the rack.
No.
And by the way, also, if you read the Darth Plagueis book, this also comes into play because there's the insinuate in the book that Darth Plagueis is who created Anakin Skywalker.
Insinuate is the active word, but it's even more complex than that. It's saying that the Force, if indeed there is a will of the Force, that's another discussion, has basically noticed what Plagueis has been up to and said, hey, not so fast.
Yeah.
And that it caused the so-called virgin birth, at least, in order to kind of go, all right, we got to compensate for all this tomfoolery going on.
Yeah. It's very, very true. So once again, if you get a chance to read those books, just do it. Just do it.
I'd recommend it. Plus, James Luceno is a fantastic writer in his own right, even if it's not on Star Wars. Also, he wrote novels in the new canon since in which he pretty much hints that what happened in Darth Plagueis still is largely true. And if you were James Luceno, you'd have done that too.
Oh, God.
So they have the conversation that Anakin is, not a child that was born by fucking. He was a child that was born by some sort of magical thing. And Qui-Gon's like, oh, that's interesting. And does he take the boy's blood at that point to get it tested, or how does that work? I don't remember.
Well, he's working on this damn car at this point.
Okay.
Drag car for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And Qui-Gon and Shmi are having a discussion off on the side, and he just, the hairs on the back of his end stand up, and he's like, I sense a Messiah here.
That's funny.
Ching. Do you think there's
and then he goes off to Anakin later on that evening, and then he takes the kid's blood because he cut himself working on the car. He was like, here, I'll get that for you.
Yeah, no.
Here, Obi-Wan, quick, run this through the simulator.
He kind of shitty, right? He's like, "Hey, don't worry about what I'm doing. I'm just collecting some of your DNA for put in this computer right here. Don't worry about what I'm doing.
I'm just checking for infections. Yeah, that's it.
There's some rust on that piece, and I'm very concerned about your health. I mean, he's already got a blood.
Can't give you tetanus now, can we?
And doesn't he give it to Obi-Wan to test on the ship? Is that right? Or does he just Qui-Gon check it?
Well, he's got what passes for a tricorder, scans the blood, sends the scan to Obi-Wan, and says, run it into the files. I want to count on this stuff. Whoa, over 20,000?
Yeah. He's got that blood disease like a motherfucker.
Well, to be honest, that's definitely one of those concepts that either needed to be expanded on or saved for some piece of media that could expand on it properly. Again, the Clone Wars got around to it, and Associated Media got around to it. The Plagueis novel got around to it. And the current canon, Disney or not, has pretty much decided, I don't see any reason to change it. We haven't seen them change it.
Yeah.
True.
So the basic rules of midichlorians are pretty much got to still be in place.
And like with him having such a high count, that's an alarm bell, right? That's a this could go really, really good or really, really bad.
Well, from the days of the old canon, they made it clear that it is possible for families that don't have Force sensitives in the bloodline to suddenly just produce one. Yeah. The Plagueis novel makes it clear that Palpatine is one of these. Otherwise, the Jedi would have found him. His family would have said, "What is your deal, son?
Get off my lawn."
He was an evil shit, man. He was just really bad, and then he ends up murdering his fucking family.
And we had to assume the fact that it's possible that Rey is, in fact, another spontaneous birth of a Force sensitive within a previously non-Forceative bloodline. Maybe the kid at the. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as I guess people should be concerned, the rules of midichlorians are still in play. They're not emphasized in later films as they were during the prequels, but these guys are still around. As far as the universe is concerned, every character's got a number of them in their cells. Boom, done.
Well, that's because a lot of people complain. They're like, wait a minute, he's got super AIDS and it makes him powerful in the Force. Is that what's going on here?
Plus, it's a very difficult concept to wrap your head around without proper time and explanation. And who has time for that in a 2-hour film that's supposed to be faster and more intense?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
pod race. Let's go to the pod race. The pod race, by the way, is one of the most fantastic scenes in a movie I've ever seen. It's so entertaining.
We need more time with the midichlorians to be sure, but yes, Space Ben-Hur chariot race scene is definitely something we need to touch on.
Yes, a lot of good luck with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Tom?
Yeah. I was going to say that prior to that we got introduced to this character who's like essentially like Anakin's nemesis in the pod races.
For no reason. I mean, one could say that certain films are weighed down with more characters than they need. It's better to simplify. It's a bit late in the game to work up any kind of feelings about, I hope Anakin defeats Sebulba because he's a little schnot.
Well, I mean, to be totally fair, Sebulba's like a real cocksucker, and he really hates that kid, man. For more
sabotages his ship and everything.
He's like, I'm the best I'm the best pod racer there is, but I'm still going to cheat so I can beat this fucking 8-year-old boy because I'm a piece of shit.
Those wacky races.
And the truth is, I guess if you want to look at it a certain way, the truth is that Sebulba and all these pod racers are very much like the kids Luke hung around with before he left Tatooine. They think they're the alphas in a small pond.
Yeah. I want to get some power converters at the Tashi station.
But yeah, that pod racing scene, it was one of those scenes where they just took their time. You know, it was quite a long, nice, action-packed scene. There's lots of Anakin with the ship breaks and he's fixing things as he's going. Lots of people like blowing up around him. It was really cool scene, and it just goes to show what this kid's capable of, right? And I guess Qui-Gon's kind of like,
It's also a really good introduction to the Hutts. The gangster family,
yes.
Jabba the Hutt obviously being one of them. They're the announcers. They kind of run the whole system, and it's the first being like, hey, this is where, you know. It also shows how old they can live too, right? Because Hutts can live to be like hundreds and hundreds of years old. So
Jabba is supposed to be in his 600s during all this.
That old fucker. So that was kind of cool. I like that whole aspect. I love continuity. That's one of my favorite things. That's why these things kind of play out for me as well as they do. Because I'm like, yeah, I remember that.
The fact that Tatooine is a Hutt enclave really speaks to the larger thing, too. Before I get into that, it's worth mentioning briefly that the basic plot of Phantom Menace is, like A New Hope, an adaptation of Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. He decided to do it twice, only it adheres a bit more to the original Kurosawa film than New Hope did. But either way, it's about a young girl of noble lineage trying to be snuck through a hostile enemy territory with the help of an old general and accompanied by a couple of assholes.
Yeah. Yes.
And while she's on this journey, the young noble girl learns a bit about life and learns what it takes to be a ruler. So by the end, she can be the queen of her family after it's saved from destruction at the end of the film. Same with Padme. She goes through a bit of a moral clarity, come to Jesus journey during Phantom Menace. Just like the little princess in Hidden Fortress, she disguises herself as a peasant, nobody important. So she can go around the peasants and learn what life is like, learns that life is hard for them, that life is monstrous for them. She's in an enclave of the Outer Rim where the Republic should have authority, but isn't recognized as having any. Its money's not even any good. Its rules about slavery are just not even paid lip service to. Hutts are in charge here. Yeah. And it's that sort of level of learning that she brings to Coruscant later, but we will get to that. Yes, and it will play into her decisions there. But first, on with the race.
Well, the race speaks for itself. I mean, what can you say about that race other than it's high octane? It's an action sequence, and it just shows you. I guess it just kind of solidifies Qui-Gon's. He thinks he's the one. He's with the midichlorian count. He sees this race, and it kind of just confirms it, doesn't it? Really, he wins the race. Even though his pod has been severely sabotaged by Sebulba, he has to fix it during the race, and that's when they decide to take Anakin with him once the ship's fixed. Do you think that's a must have been one of the most difficult decisions for his mom to make? Of course, letting her, or do you reckon she'd have felt joy in the fact that her little Anakin was saved?
All the impressions I got were that Shmi was able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the films and other materials state that she went on to have a somewhat happier life away from
Yeah,
and become married and tie into the greater family arc in that way. But I'm sure she's depicted as just kind of looking up into the stars going, well, Anakin, wherever you are, I hope you're out there.
Yeah.
Accepting or not accepting loss.
Yeah.
The loss of something or someone that is valued is a great deal of the meaning behind Star Wars. It's at the core of Anakin's arc. It's at the core of Luke's. It may end up being at the core of Rey's arc. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
go on, Eric. Sorry.
Actually, go right ahead. Actually,
I was going to say, well, en route to the ship, they have that first encounter with Darth Maul. Well, Qui-Gon has that first epic encounter with Darth Maul, who is sent to the planet to look for the Jedi. What are our first thoughts? Our first on encounters with Darth Maul? First impressions?
It was one of my favorite things, and still is one of my favorite things, wielding the dual-bladed lightsabers. Because as a kid, I'd always take those two like little lightsabers that came with the 3.5-inch action figures, and I'd like glue them together so they'd have that ability. So when they first pulled it out, he's like, psh, psh. I was like, ah! I'm like, fucking George Lucas owes me money.
Yeah, true. I love the saber. I got to admit that as a fan of the old canon from way back, I'd heard of Exar Kun already, so I was like, seen it. But at the same time, it's a beautiful thing to behold on film. It distinguishes Darth Maul as a character right out of the gate. A lot distinguishes him. I wish he had more lines.
I wish Darth Maul had a better arc, to be honest, because he's probably one of the.
Oh, don't you worry. He ended up having one.
I know. I did hear that he just carry on afterwards. We'll get.
And also, once again, back to the Darth Plagueis book where Darth Maul was introduced, it'd give you a little more meat to his backstory as well, and why he kind of is, because he's almost like more evil than Palpatine the way he was treated his whole life. But regardless, that's another conversation entirely. Darth Maul he was played by that guy that played what's his face.
Well, just like Darth Vader, his duties were split between two different sides. His body was played by Ray Park, just like Vader's was played by Dave Prowse, and a different guy for the voice.
Ray Parks, who played Toad.
He played Toad. He played Snake Eyes,
and he was also the Headless Horseman in Sleepy Hollow.
And what I think was one of his better uses. He was excellent in that, but a lot about that movie was excellent.
Yes. I agree.
And then Peter Serafinowicz doing the voice with the soft, the breathy, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi sort of thing, which Sam Witwer took up and in the Clone Wars series even refined and made deeper, more passionate, and more fascinating.
Yeah, and the last time I revealed myself to a Jedi, I got kicked out of Disney World, so it's unfair.
Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave the park.
Why? I was just revealing myself to the Jedi. I'm a Sith.
You can reveal yourself to the Jedi when your chores are done. Come on, get to it.
But my lightsaber's ready now.
Okay, so what happens now? They go to to see Chancellor Valorum.
Well, Qui-Gon basically does it. He only fights him for a quick second, then hops up on the ship.
I think that's a wise decision, though. Because they need to disappear quickly before they kind of circle on him.
Now, as far as the history books are concerned, that's, as far as the Jedi know, the first time a Jedi has confirmed to have been bouncing against a Sith in 1,000 years or something like this.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a good point. So cool. That's another underplayed event, because they were quite shocked, though, weren't they? They were kind of like, there was a Sith, and then Yoda's there was a Sith. Like, what? There's a fucking Sith? Like, what the fuck?
It's a good
in a
thing there.
Scene that reveals kind of fact that the rot has already set in for the Jedi Order. That's a larger theme that we may need to deal with, perhaps at a side thing, but really, to do it simply, the Jedi were depicted as kind of romantic in the classic trilogy, and because all you had was what Obi-Wan was telling Luke to go by, and as we subsequently learned, Obi-Wan isn't entirely truthful, just mostly so. He didn't get into detail about how, in fact, the Jedi Order had been kind of getting old, rotten, complacent for a long time, and then as the events of the prequels progress, they got corrupt as well, and walked away from their moral principles as well, and allowed the Clone Wars to push them away from their moral principles without saying, hey, wait a minute. That's a larger arc of this entire saga. The prequels have the Jedi Order succumbing to corruption and destroyed. The classic trilogy is the pivoting point on which one young man preserves the Order from absolute oblivion, only to reconsider that. And then the sequel trilogy in which hopefully the Jedi Order, or whatever new order of Force users is going to come out of all this, is going to either establish or reestablish itself, having hopefully learned the lesson of all this, whatever that lesson turns out to be. We'll get to that. But the first instance of this is the fact that they're told that there's a Sith here, and they're like, meh. They don't even necessarily believe that there's a Sith around.
Yeah, so that's why they're sent with Amidala back to Naboo to kind of investigate, right? So they're kind of like, okay, this invasion's going to happen, but rather than help with the invasion, we want you to find out who this motherfucker is, right? Because, you know, there's, like you said, they've seen a Sith, so they know that something's going on in the background, so they need to find more, because it's got to be something bad, right?
Mm-hmm. In fact, though, their backs are turned, and they can't see the Sith right in front of them.
It's true. It's very, very true. But he's also the master deceptor, so, you know, he's got.
And what he's up to on the Coruscant sequences of this film really are the things that the rest of the film turns on, but the audience doesn't know it.
Yes. Yeah, because there's a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people will join a Star Wars movie for the lightsaber fights and the action sequence, but as soon as they start doing these quiet political moments where they're chatting away, like in Coruscant, that's when the mind switches off, right? So you're missing a lot of information that's going on.
Except that it shouldn't be switching off at that point. No. And I do think that it's partly a matter of the editing, because the screenplay versions of the politics scenes do play out in a way that spells it out clearer. And I think clarity would have helped.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So this is one of those odd situations where I would actually say, yes, add the couple of minutes of extra lines or footage back to such a thing, if only to help just allow the audience to wrap their head around it a little better.
Yeah, because there's a lot of detail towards it. You know, like you said, there's been a lot going on before this movies even begun.
The beauty, the essential though, is more psychological than political, and the audience can read that. And I want to refer you to the scene in Palpatine's apartment, which, by the way, is all red as a way of kind of giving the audience a subtle hint about this man's character. Color theory as to psychology.
It's all velour, I swear to God.
But in that sequence, Palpatine is basically presenting Amidala with two choices, neither palatable to her.
Yeah.
One deliberately designed to be less palatable than the other.
Yeah.
She can do one of two things. For one thing, she came to the Senate going, still a little naive, as he says, Queen Amidala is young.
Yeah. Got you in the end.
Queen Amidala needs a throat lozenge.
Does anybody ever Ricola?
Queen Amidala is young and naive and all that crud. And so, yeah, she is. She still thinks the Chancellor can do something, and then Palpatine shuts the door on that. I'm afraid the Chancellor has little real power. There's a corruption scandal and all that. And so he presents it with one of two choices. Either vote no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, which she resents because he's been a political ally to this point, or let the case go through the courts and let it go on and on and on without resolution. He knows exactly which choice he'll take because, as she says, the courts take even longer to decide things than the Senate, and lives are on the line. That's his method throughout the entire trilogy of prequels. Present people in a tight and frightened situation
with another
two choices, neither of them palatable, and structure it so that they're likely to choose the one he wants.
it's kind of how politics works in both the UK and America at the moment, right? It's kind of similar. Okay, so they go back to Naboo. Jar Jar wants to go and get the Gungans to help. Amidala wants to go and
rescue the other people that are kept captives. They got the Viceroy there. They got the droid army there. And they hatched this elaborate plan to bust in and go up these these grapplers to get themselves up in the windows, which was always a funny little scene.
Yeah.
And they get up there. It's the captain. It's one of her dad, not her dad. Who's the other people they have held captive, Eric?
Mostly it's her heads of government, mostly her cabinet.
Yeah.
All the handmaids came with her. She obviously left. Her chief of security left. A bunch of security guards probably stayed behind.
And they need to go get access to the ship so they can have this elaborate fight that's going on up above them as well, because they're being attacked from both sides, on the ground and in the sky.
Because in Return of the Jedi, there was a fight both on the surface and in space at the same time, and on the more personal level. In fact, that goes all the way back to the earliest scripts, where there was a big climactic battle all over the place.
Yeah.
Did it work in this particular episode? You tell me. And in the end, I'm happy with it.
I think so too. I mean,
notice that in the end, it's her and just a bunch of volunteers that end up having to do the job of getting the Federation off her planet. It's not the judicial forces. It's not the planetary security forces. Yeah. There's no Republic Army or Navy to speak of. Even the Jedi don't help. Beyond the fact that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan just go, "Oops, I'm helping."
Yeah, oopsie daisy. And then obviously you've got a handful of fighters that go up to the invasion ship. You've got the Gungans down, ready to do their fighting. Jar Jar's been promoted to Bombardier General, whatever it is.
Lisa make you Bombad General.
That's it. It's so funny. For such a clever group of people to go and tell Anakin to go and wait in the cockpit of a fighter that's on autopilot. I mean, he accidentally knocks it, doesn't he? But that was a very odd moment for me. But I mean, obviously, that's how they were like, how can we get Anakin up in the sky and make him accidentally shoot out the shields for the droid army?
It's more of a forensics question than a character-based question, because Return of the Jedi's like Obi-Wan's going, "When I first knew him, your father was already a great pilot." How? How'd you know that? Apparently by seeing race cars, more or less, in a Ben-Hur sequence, and then accidentally not getting killed in a fighter that you could barely reach the controls of.
Let's do a loop-de-loop. That's a cool trick. Yeah.
Let's try spinning. Yeah. And in fact, that is a motif that continues. Even in The Last Jedi, we have Ben Solo, his grandson, spinning. That's a good trick. By God, it actually worked.
Yeah. The fight with the Gungans was quite cool. I quite like that. And there's a certain thing you told me not to mention at all during this whole thing, which about Jar Jar. But there's a lot of luck with Jar Jar during this battle.
Insanely lucky.
Yeah, because somebody mentioned to me that there is actually a fighting style where you do rely on a lot of luck and a lot of not drunken boxing. What's it called? Well, there's a style of fighting where you do move around, you throw your enemy off, and you act clumsy, and then you get your punches in. But
I'm by no means a martial arts expert, so I'm the last person you should ask questions about with regard to drunken fighting.
The point I'm trying to make is, a lot of these scenes played out like just pure luck. Like he's batting away this bomber, and it accidentally rolls and takes out one of the ships or something, or he's hanging on the barrel of a tank, and the guy on the horse is like, "Yeah, throw it in there," and he catches it. He doesn't catch it. He kind of pats it, and it takes out the tank or something. All these silly things that happen to Jar Jar. They're very lucky, and you kind of can't help but think there's something special about Jar Jar, right?
Either that, or it's just that Lucas's style of humor gears more towards the Harold Lloyd than towards what other people may have wanted for this character. Eventually, Jar Jar did find a kind of character archetype that was made to work for him in the Clone Wars series, where he became more like Parsifal, the pure fool, rather than just Mr. Accident that accidents his way into a generalship, accidents his way across a battlefield, accidents his way into the Senate, and accidents the Republic into an empire.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that you can look at it like that, or you can just choose not to. I mean, I like the idea that there's something incredibly lucky, but so he's one with the Force. That's what I feel.
You want so badly to just out and say, I think he's a secret Sith.
I don't know. No, not necessarily that, but the fact that there's obviously something there. There's obviously something.
He's having an evil plan of my very own.
It works the same way as, oh my God, Anakin has accidentally just knocked out the shield generators.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not right?
And that did feel its hedge contrived, but yes, it's like poetry. It's like they rhyme.
Yeah.
And we need to go into that, by the way, in a big way before we move any further, because believe me, our perception of all three trilogies hinges on it. The theme of repeating narrative structure.
Yes.
The first classic trilogy was just obviously a coming-of-age story. It was a Bildungsroman in the German literary tradition. Boy becomes man. Bah, boom, done.
Yeah.
And then, but also it was an example of a positive human being. Now Lucas is asked to present us with an example of a negative human being. How best a way to illustrate what it makes the difference between the two than making it clear that it's about the choices each one made? And how best to illustrate that than by having them in similar situations where we, the audience, are meant to appreciate the subtle differences in iterations and rather than begrudge the obvious similarities.
Yeah.
Now, that means that if the classic trilogy is the hero's journey, the prequel trilogy is the deconstruction of the hero's journey, the sequel trilogy is the deconstruction of the deconstruction. But we'll get there.
Oh, God. There's so much happening in this final third of the movie that and it does a lot of it boil down to luck. I mean, Anakin taking out the shield generator and Jar Jar doing Jar Jar, but in between all this is one of the most epic lightsaber fights you're ever going to see, and that's between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul.
In a scene that alone justified the fact that I went to see this film in the theater 9 times.
Yeah.
Wow.
The one shot where Obi-Wan charges out and meets Darth Maul, and it's absolutely balletic, and it's done the way George ideally does his best shots. There's no camera movement at all. He's very much a documentarian, just staying out of the way, going, I'm just over here. Just don't hit me with those lightsabers. You guys just have fun over there.
Oh, Eric, I love you.
And it's so sublime that, yes, I paid 9 times to see it because the scene was so sublime.
It was I just think it was unexpected because as a kid, you used to like these really slow, very definitive lightsaber fights. There's a lot of power behind those hits, but there's not a lot of choreography. Not really. So you get this amazing scene where you've got Darth Maul fending off two Jedis quite easily as well, and they're all spinning around, they're jumping around, and it was so acrobatic and so magical to see. It threw us
Some
all
will
off.
argue that it became too acrobatic, that it went too far in a certain direction away from the classic fighting styles, in which fighting styles really weren't all that noticeable.
Yeah.
And then came the sequel trilogy, where it's something of a balance between the two, where the personal is still there, but you can discern a fighting style for Kylo Ren.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you look at all of them, they all pick and choose their own different styles for it. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader at the time, they have more of a katana samurai type of feel to them as far as like attack and protect themselves with and slashing, not so much the way that Kylo Ren goes about it, which is more towards a knight, which is hack and slash. And then there's also Darth Maul, who would obviously represent another form of maybe what's the stick fighting? I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
You're still coming on the very important point, which is that fighting styles are meant to represent character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you remember Dooku, he has a very swish style of fighting. It's almost, it's almost like fencing. It's almost like fencing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, 100%. 100% agree with you right there. It's more of a fencing thing. Yoda, I don't really know what to put on Yoda for like a style if I was to even give him
flippy,
one.
spinny shit.
The whirling dervish.
Yeah, the whirling dervish. My God, good pull.
It's not like Mace Windu, who has a definable style that fans have made into a thing, Vapad and all that. Yoda just has the absolute blitzing.
Okay, so and then that obviously leads to one of the climaxes of the movie is Obi-Wan being trapped behind the force field, and then Qui-Gon facing off Darth Maul by himself. Epic, right? I mean, that scene with Qui-Gon dying, you just didn't expect it, and
no, because you really everyone enjoyed Qui-Gon. No one ever complains about Qui-Gon Jinn throughout the movie. I that's not one of the things I tend to hear is, oh, I really hated Qui-Gon Jinn. It's more
fuck
like,
Liam Neeson.
I would argue we needed to learn more about Qui-Gon Jinn, but Clone Wars takes care of that too.
It's true.
By the way, speaking of Clone Wars, notice the fact that Qui-Gon dies and his last words are, "Promise me you'll train the boy." And then in the Clone Wars, his spirit, most likely, appears before Obi-Wan, and the very first thing he asks is, have you done as I asked? Have you trained the boy?
Which, if you're Obi-Wan, wouldn't you be like, yeah, thanks, Dick, I haven't seen you in like a couple years, and you're not like, hey, how are things? And it's all about the boy, whatever.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to get to the point. The whole story of how he becomes a ghost. That's kind of a plot in its own right. We're meant to understand, according to Clone Wars, that as of the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon has had some of the secrets of this in his head for some time now. That at some point prior to Phantom Menace, he went off so that the Jedi Council and probably Obi-Wan knew not about where he'd went. He'd been summoned there by these priestesses, like Yoda later was, in order to learn the great gift of how to not die when you die, because dark times were coming and forces of light had to remain. But his training was incomplete, so Darth Maul pig sticks him with a lightsaber. Now Obi-Wan dies, and his body doesn't disappear.
Yes.
It burns, and he doesn't come back as a blue glowy the way Obi-Wan and Yoda later do. He gradually learns that talent over time.
Yeah.
We'll get to how that arc goes the further along in the trilogy we get. But at this point, yes, Qui-Gon was killed physically, but he already had a trick up his sleeve.
Yeah. And obviously that leads to Obi-Wan finally being released.
By the way, the Clone Wars says that Darth Maul didn't really die at that fight either.
No, yeah, I've heard this. That he gets new legs, he survives, and he goes on to...
He gets spider legs or crab legs, whichever one you want to call it, but he gets badass.
Yeah.
And then goes on to become a magnificent character, truly charismatic and worthy of your time on watching the show. But that's later.
I like the fact that Darth Maul had Obi-Wan beat. He had him beat, man. He had him gone. Like all it would have taken him was a jab to the head, and he would have been gone. Actually spared him a little bit of mercy. He was playing with his toy, and it was at that moment where Obi-Wan thought he'd take advantage with the lightsaber, and then jump over him and then cut him in half. If
hubris.
If Darth Maul hadn't have been a dog playing with a chew toy, he could have ended Obi-Wan pretty easily. So I think I was gutted to see kind of Obi-Wan go like that, but at the same time, once I found out after, recently that he actually survived, I was like, yay, maybe we'll see more.
Yeah, I think that Darth Maul must have been pretty full of himself at the moment because he just barely killed the master, and he's like, well, I already killed the master, so the apprentice is gonna be nothing. I'm gonna pick him off like easy pickings. So that's probably what gave him like the little bit of I'm gonna enjoy this moment and really like savor the flavor as I kill this young Jedi. And
yeah, but really the moment is to be savored after it happens.
It's a classic bad guy mistake, right? It's like I'm gonna
and you should first go through the formality of actually killing the guy before going, yay, I killed the guy.
Yeah.
Cart before horse. So also his loss, even though he did eventually come back, his loss was a big deal for Sidious. Sidious had plans for Maul in the greater scheme of things. Sam Witwer, who played the voice on the Clone Wars, always thought so. He was like, this man was supposed to keep picking at Jedi ranks from behind the scenes, and then when the war started, he was supposed to have a role something like Grievous, some kind of public threat to go booga booga and threaten the people with, so that the more frightened the people get, the more a police state they'll welcome.
Yeah.
But to be totally fair, I love Grievous, so I'm okay with the fact that Grievous was Grievous.
Yeah. Obviously, so the drone war is gone because Anakin has accidentally shot out the shield generators. The Gungans have celebrated their victory, and that's the end of the movie, right? That's pretty much Phantom Menace. Is there anything else we've missed?
Well, what he's done is he's left a bad taste in the mouths of not only the Trade Federation, but the other guilds and corporations who are like, so this is how the Republic treats the Trade Federation? They had real grievances. What were those taxes about? That was BS. And you're going to, like, arrest their leaders and shoot at them and then put them on trial 3 times? Maybe we need to kind of organize a little bit of withdrawal from this Republic. So not only do you have systems that have been feeling like they want to leave for some time, even before Phantom Menace, now you got the corporations thinking it's time to put an end to this. And they have private armies. Yeah, they were kind of a joke at Naboo, but they didn't stay that way.
Roger.
They were always used for comedy on the show, yes, but they didn't remain as silly a threat. They got better robots. They got better ways to run the robots. Yeah. They got a lot more robots.
Yeah. So you enjoyed this movie.
You enjoy this movie. You enjoy the fact that it has a certain aesthetic about it. Flash Gordon, yes, but also if the classic trilogy was meant to represent the 70s aesthetic where it's rough and rusty and crunchy and all that, this is the late 40s, early 50s aesthetic where there's a lot of chrome and a lot of more fanciful designs for spacecraft.
Yeah.
Again, history is meant to be implied by design as well as everything else.
Yeah, and that was a big problem for everybody. It's like, well, how come in like Return of the Jedi they had like all these blip 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 switches and then in Phantom Menace they've got all these holograms and nice shiny ships, but that's the cost of war, isn't it? That's what happens when you take away people's economy. Like, you know, things kind of shrivel and die, and they don't become as fanciful as what they used to be. You know, it's a long process.
That and designs change as resources and availability of resources change, and function changes, and technology changes.
Yeah.
In fact, the change in the prequel trilogy of stuff that looks like the Phantom Menace to stuff that looks like you'd see in A New Hope is gradual but noticeable.
Yeah, it's quite.
And I'll point it out as we go.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on quickly because we've done an hour and 20 on this. We need to squeeze episode 2 into 40 minutes if we can, so we can spend a good hour on episode 3 because I like that one.
Indeed, because episode 2 is kind of the in-betweener.
It is, yeah. So there's a lot of information to take in, but not an awful lot happens in that movie. I mean, I watched it recently, and a lot more happened in it than I thought it did, because I always remembered episode 2 as being like very political, lots of long conversations about what's going to happen, but then I watched it and I was like, there is a lot going on with Anakin. That's very important.
Lot of things happen in the intervening years between episodes 1 and 2 that the film doesn't touch on, and that's a shame because it provides clarity to a lot of this. We want to talk about how the galaxy is caught up in a cycle of division, schism, warfare, rebuilding, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
In between episodes 1 and 2, a whole lot of systems have finally said, you know what, screw this Republic business. It's run by corporations. We want out of here. And a whole bunch of senators actually do leave the Senate en masse.
Yeah.
And they never show it. Yeah. And they go off and establish their own order because Count Dooku shows up and says, you know, time is right for a guy that can lead us into another New Order, and I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So they follow Dooku out of the Senate and build the separatist movement. And we don't get to see any of that in between. But by the time of episode 2, the crisis is so bad that Palpatine's able to use it not to serve for just one term, not for 2 terms, but past his constitutional limit. So he's a couple years into his semi-legal 3rd term.
Yeah, he pulled an FDR on everyone.
And that's even before wartime happens and the Security Act allows him to stay in there with emergency powers for even longer.
And it was at that point he cut a hole in the front of his desk so that nobody could see his wheelchair.
And then in the meantime, while all that's going on, as you said, Alex, a lot is going on with Anakin.
Yeah.
He's growing up. He's growing a bit more confident in himself, but he's also freaking arrogant.
Yeah.
And this is where we get introduced to Hayden Christensen.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I have a wonderful theory about Hayden Christensen. I've said this to Alex. I hadn't had the chance to speak about it with you, Tom, although we started touching on it last night.
Yeah.
It's a kind of forensics take on acting. It's akin to looking at an axe buried in the wall in the Thing in the Norwegian camp and going, let's make a prequel film about that and show you how the axe got into that wall exactly in that way.
Because he got a lot of hate for the way he portrayed Anakin, didn't he? You know, he's people take the mick out of him.
So did Jay Lloyd. And I think the problem is that the message they're trying to get across is that Anakin, at his core, is fundamentally not an expressive person. I try to put emphases on words in such a way as to make what I say interesting, and that makes it expressive, and not everyone is like that. Some people are like this. They don't have a lot of affect. And that's kind of a subtle way of getting at character, as to say that there's something slightly less than human about Anakin to begin with. Certainly, James Earl Jones played Vader, except for a few emotional outburst moments,
as very even-toned. There isn't a whole lot of emphasis, that sort of thing.
Now try to see if you're Hayden Christensen and you're given that to start with. Okay, what makes that voice sound like that? Probably the thingy in the mask that makes it sound like James Earl Jones.
There's a James Earl Jones-orator.
But the voice behind that mask has the same inflections and speech patterns, just not the deep voice. It would be the equivalent of my putting a thing on that makes my voice sound like this. But the way I say words is the exact same thing. It just makes me sound like this because I've got a farmer voice thing attached to my mask.
Can you imagine if his voice actually did do that? It would be such a different movie.
So now apply that to Hayden. If you were to take the lines he says in either film and say them with a Vader tone, it begins to make sense. It sounds funny, but it makes sense.
I don't like sand.
Gets in the joints.
It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Do you understand what I'm trying to get across? We're talking about a character that just doesn't put a lot of oomph into the way he speaks because he's just one of those sorts of people. He's like this. And that's the case even after he puts the mask on with the James Earl Jones orator in it.
He talks like this. He just doesn't really emphasize, except when he gets pissed off.
No.
Or like that. Now, how would that have sounded? In fact, how would Vader's lines sound if done through the voice of a teenager?
Snarky.
Commander, tear the ship apart until you found those plaids. You know,
killing the environment with plastic, you know.
But do you understand what I'm trying to do? He's doing a forensics on this James Earl Jones voice, and this is what he came up with. Does it work? Does it come across? You tell me. It's up to every individual viewer. But I think that's what he was going for there.
And you told me that, and I thought it was genius, absolutely ingenious, because this poor kid's got so much. He's had so much like hate over the years because of the way he portrayed this wooden, monotonous kind of voice character that is almost comparable to cardboard, you know. But at the same time, what you are saying, it seems to be right to me. It feels right to me that he would do that because that's how Darth Vader talks, how he is.
It also says something to the larger problem of I think people are gagging on Anakin, so to speak, in the sense that his character just isn't a likable character, in the same sense that the Jedi Order at this time isn't depicted as very likable because it's rife with corruption, and people just don't quite see that that's the point, or if they see it, they're just not happy with that being the point. And that's your right as a viewer. But I have to wonder if that isn't part of the point. Anakin is dislikable, and that's part of the point. The Jedi are a bunch of arrogant people, and that's part of the point.
With him being such a bright-minded guy that can make, that can do, that can fly, that can fight, it's a waste of time adding charisma into anything else in life, I imagine. You know, let's put our focus in where it's needed. Let's become a Jedi. Let's learn how to be the best pilot in the world. Let's do this, and you know, everything else is just, apart from Padme, everything else can just fuck off, right? You know, and that's how I imagine Anakin. You know?
The war between the core issues of selflessness and selfishness in his character, which is fundamentally what the light and dark sides are all meant to represent with regard to you, the audience member. Padme represents his selfishness, his need to keep things, to keep her, to hold on to things for the loss of what was valued, as I said, how to cope with the losing of things. That was a major, I mentioned that earlier. That is a major point. It's definitely a major point with regard to their relationship.
Yeah. So, like, very quickly, we'll go through the synopsis very quickly, and then we'll double back. So,
right.
So Padme, there's a suicide attempt by Padme, which leads to this crazy car chase where they try and, which is it leads to them protecting Padme, which then leads to the second attempt, which is the little swiggly worm thing. And then we're going to have to do it like this because otherwise we're not going to fit it all in, which leads to Anakin and Qui-Gon, fucking hell, Obi-Wan and Anakin chasing the assassin through the streets on the floating cars. Then the assassin gets taken out by it's Jango Fett, isn't it? Jango Fett, which leads to Anakin going after Jango Fett, and then whilst Anakin's meant to be looking after Padme, he's having the nightmares about his mom. Okay, which sets us up for the middle of the movie. So these dreams that Anakin's having, what do you make of them, Eric?
Well, before I get into that, there's also the brief observation that just like The Empire Strikes Back, just like The Last Jedi, this film involves the main characters being separated from each other and having that separation impact their decisions in terms of character. What effect does that separation have on their decisions? That becomes a motif in all three of the second films in these trilogies. Again, just pointing out patterns.
And also, Anakin doesn't have his master with him to kind of push him in the right direction or stop him from making decisions that he makes. You know, Obi-Wan's over the other side of the galaxy, checking out the clone army, whilst Anakin is pining over his mom and having a fling with Padme.
And the decisions Anakin makes would be probably different if he'd had Obi-Wan next to him when he was making them, or Luke would have been different had Leia and Han been right next to him going, "Hey kid, I don't know." Or Rey's decisions might have been different had Finn or Poe been present, or Luke's may have been had other people been present.
Yeah.
The separation informs decisions, and in this case, because it's meant to represent a negative example of a human being, they're negative decisions.
Yeah.
I.e., kill a bunch of innocent people because some of them attacked his mother, but not all of them could have. So he basically burns down King's Landing.
Yes, he does. He does. He goes on a complete killing spree, kills the women, the children, everyone.
The younglings.
They were animals, and I slaughtered them like animals.
It sounded like Arnie then. I killed them all.
I hate them.
But seriously, when read as James Earl Jones doing Hayden Christensen, the performance fits better.
I was dying then. Sorry. Yeah, it's the moment when you hear that Darth Vader music for the first time, whilst he's explaining all this, and you see the hate in his eyes, like, dun, dun, dun. Oh, that the hairs are up on your back of your neck. Oh,
and then you realize that iconic theme is less to do with just being Vader in the suit and more about this is to tell you when Anakin makes a bad choice.
Turn the page.
That's the moment. That's the moment everything happens, and that's really important. And if Obi-Wan was there with him, he wouldn't have been there. He'd have been like, you're a Jedi, Anakin. You can't do that. He'd have been,
By the way, the Clone Wars series does build on that, where the tension between Anakin and Obi-Wan as characters does grow, and there are moments where Anakin gets all tough cop on things, even throughout the series, and Obi-Wan's like looking over, going, "Are you sure you don't want to be acting like this?"
Yeah.
Anakin, quit stabbing people in the back. Anakin, quit being violent. Anakin.
Yeah. Okay, now let's flip the coin. So Obi-Wan is chasing after Jango Fett. He then gets, obviously, it leads him to the ocean planet, where he finds the clone army, which he believes, he's been told that it's for the Republic.
And the Clone Wars does indeed go into that in greater detail as well, that all this stuff happened even before the Phantom Menace, while Palpatine was still a senator. He used Dooku, who used Sifo-Dyas to basically hire these guys, and they're not going to ask questions as long as they're paid.
Yeah.
And it goes into detail about how the clones were created.
That fight scene, by the way,
it fits into it.
That fight scene between Obi-Wan and Fett is so stunning. It looks so beautiful with the dark and the rain and the struggle that they both go through this fight. It's just epic.
I will say that I love Jango's armor. The design of the armor by Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston to begin with was always nice. It's part of why the character of Boba Fett was so popular. Yeah. But it looks great in silver with blue highlights, doesn't it?
Yeah. I just think they played the scene out brilliantly, obviously with the rain and the dark outset, and
just your normal Tuesday in Southwest Florida.
Really? You should come over here and spend a week over here. Okay, so then it leads to Obi-Wan following Jango through the
Well, basically, he follows Jango from Kamino to Geonosis, where there's a big military buildup. Jango uses some seismic charges to try to lose Obi-Wan. Doesn't work, but there's a really cool sound effect come out of it. And we do love it when Ben Burt's on his game, don't we?
Absolutely.
And he finds out that Dooku is creating the Separatist army. He's the head honcho there.
Keep it in mind, the Separatists have been a rising power for the past couple of years since they left the Senate, but now they have struck a deal with the guilds, the Trade Federation, the Commerce Guilds, the stuff that I mentioned at the end of the Phantom Menace part of it, who are also kind of sick of this horse pucky and go, why don't we give you our robot armies to help you guys out?
Yeah.
And the point of Geonosis, the significance of that in the quote-unquote history of these people, is that everybody agreed, yes, let's pool our resources. Let's make a thing out of this separatist movement. Let's make a confederacy of it.
Yeah.
Parliament, the whole deal.
And the whole point of this podcast isn't to just let's give you the verbal version of Star Wars. Let's break it down. Dooku is an evil sounding, evil looking motherfucker. How can you look at that guy and go, he's not a Sith, is he?
Because he's played by one of the most fascinating people in acting ever.
He is, but do
you realize how badass you have to have the fact that you played Count Dracula be one of the least interesting things on your resume? A descendant directly through his mother from the Emperor Charlemagne himself, a guy who served in World War II. We'll never know precisely what he did because of the Secrets Act, but he knows what it sounds like when a man's been stabbed in the back, by God.
He's also does death metal.
All the way to that by the fact that he does death metal in his last years and died at late 90s, early hundreds. Am I correct?
Yep.
But either way, having lived a long frickin' life, he knew Tolkien personally and therefore got to be in Lord of the Rings, if only because of that. Never mind the fact that he was killer as Saruman. got to be in Star Wars all late in life. The man had a huge number of attaboys to his name. Fascinating man.
Absolutely, and Christopher. Yeah, one of the treasures of cinema. But my point being is, how could anybody from the Jedi Council look at that guy and go, "Yeah, he's fine," because he looks evil. You know?
Why do people trust anybody that to you looks obviously and tangibly wrong for the role? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
People just have hopes that they invest so deeply in someone that they're not shakeable or are not easily shakeable. I noticed it as early as the Ross Perot presidential candidacy, where at least in conservative Naples, Florida, people had the impression, oh, this guy's really going to be the stuff. He's going to be the thing that fixes things. He had no prayer. Yeah. But that meant nothing to the people that I personally encountered that believed in him to the hilt. The fact that Dooku probably never had a prayer of winning this war against the Republic probably doesn't matter to the many people at the grassroots level that believed in him or walked out of the Senate for him. Which is fine because he is Palpatine's bait.
Yes, absolutely. And he does what he was supposed to. They end up capturing Obi-Wan. And then that leads...
And tells him what is in fact the absolute truth and this film's version of the I am your father moment. But it's more of an ideological sort of revelation than a personal one. Yeah. So it doesn't hit you the same way.
Yeah, it's more like the corruption runs deep, son. You ain't going to survive this. You might as well join me because you're not going to survive.
He flat out tells them the Senate is controlled by this guy named Darth Sidious. Hundreds of senators are in league with him.
Yeah. And of course,
and just like Luke and Vader, Kenobi chooses not to buy it.
Do you think Obi-Wan is too young a Jedi Master to be able to sense this? Do you know what I mean? There's got to be a point in a Jedi's career or a Jedi's kind of progression when they might be able to be like, yeah, I need to get out of here. I can't stick around, because he pretty much gives himself up, doesn't he? You know, where's he going to go? Does that make sense to you?
You may have to restate it, because I'm actually going, why would the Jedi not suspect
because
Dooku? Why would they believe in him so much? Because he was a former Jedi.
Yeah. Get a little bit of credibility about him.
Yeah, I suppose. But he gives off so much fucking bad vibes that it's like, we need to look at Dooku. We really need to just take a check and just check the files, please. Let's keep an eye on him for.
But I think that's a literary convention akin to a character doing an aside in a Shakespearean play, where Richard III occasionally does an aside to the audience, going, "Watch me do this evil thing," and then he does a little thing to wrap that up and get into the rest of the drama. "Dive thoughts down to my soul. Here Clarence comes," says Richard III. So. That may be just kind of more of a dramatic convention than anything else, that we, the audience, can see the bomb under the table and the other people at the table can't.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the next part comes with Anakin and Padme. He's like the girl he's meant to be protecting. He takes her to a fucking war zone or a planet where, he goes to find Obi-Wan, and they end up all getting captured and thrown into the gladiator pit. Which I think is pretty cool. I like the way they take down all the animals by working together. I love the little bit where they're complaining about being captured, and you've already got Padme releasing herself and climbing up the thing, and Obi-Wan's like, well, she's looking after herself, mate. She's fine. I love that bit. It's brilliant.
She's got this, and really that's kind of a theme that appears in episode 3. She's really got this, and if you were to just let her be herself, she'll be fine. Don't worry too much, because you'll cause more problems than you'll solve.
Yeah. They bring down the beasts, and then all of a sudden, you see all
in a scene that meant to evoke Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars novels in a big, big way, just as an aside.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's why I love you, Eric. He's full of these fantastic. This is why we got you to do this, because those little. I would have had no idea that's what that was. And then of course we've got the Jedi come to the rescue, don't they? They turn up with the new clone. They do turn up with the new clone army, don't they?
Yoda gets the Camino and he requisitions the clone troopers.
That's right,
and
and
for the first time, you're seeing stormtroopers more or less take the field of battle.
Yeah. And then the theater sort of lights up with lightsabers. They're everywhere, and there's this huge fight.
And 200 Jedi show up at the head of this army, and it is impressive. It's undercut by the fact that the music score is kind of patched together from parts of other parts of the score and parts of the Phantom Menace score.
Yeah.
That's one issue I have with it. Something during the production of that just made that happen, whereas the music in The Empire Strikes Back at this point in the third act flows perfectly and is geared towards the emotional core of the scene.
So for this bit, they were kind of just put it on a loop. Just put it on a loop. It's fine. They won't know. They won't know. There's too many lightsabers.
They have action music from other parts of the film. They have action parts of the music from when Padme and everybody's trying to escape Naboo and Phantom Menace. It just doesn't work as well as it ought, and that's a tragedy.
Do you think they overdid it with the Jedi? Do you think like seeing that 10-minute Jedi kind of almost desensitized the thing? Like seeing a lightsaber strike up for the first time, or any time in a movie now, I suppose, because there's less of them. But every time a kind of lightsaber sparks up, it's kind of like, oh. But when you see like 200 of them lighting up, it's kind of like, oh, there's lots of them now. You know,
there's a lot of lightsabers right there.
Yeah.
You have to see it at least once, the prime of the Jedi in their prime, fighting as they would in their prime. Plus, it's also the first shot in the long 3-year war that we've been hearing about for ever since A New Hope, and now we get to see the opening shots.
Yeah. But that's where the Sith went right where the Jedi didn't. Is like they were like, oh, we don't need 200 of us. That's just we don't need thousands of people. We'll just keep it very small.
It was an order 10,000 strong.
Yeah.
At the time the war started. And Sidious? Well, there's hints to indicate that he had both Dooku and Maul as his apprentices even before the Phantom Menace, that he had Maul as his official apprentice and was seeing Dooku on the side.
Dooku was definitely knees deep in Sith clunge for many years. I can tell from that motherfucker. But yeah, we have this.
Well, he is Darth Tyrannus and therefore officially a Sith apprentice. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Anyway, so we have the scene with Mace Windu and Jango Fett, the fight scene. That's right, isn't it? They kind of have that duel, that fight, and then he lops his head off.
That's what happens. And of course, they follow up on that in the Clone Wars too, because Boba wasn't going to stay happy about it. He was going to put a hit out on that guy.
Yeah, him holding that helmet and kind of like looking up, and that's the inspiration. That's like, I'm going to get you, you fucker.
Did anybody else just feel like the head should have just fallen out the moment he picked up that helmet? I was like,
we got to keep it PG, motherfucker. We can't do that shit.
The further along Star Wars went, the further along the game of hide the gore went. And granted, A New Hope is pretty grungy. Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru don't exactly look their best after they've been
they
fried.
don't know.
Yeah. But with an acknowledgement of the fact that, yeah, kids watch this too, there was an attempt to be creative about how you depict the violence. And so it almost became like a game I would play.
Yeah.
Beginning with the prequels and then moving on into Clone Wars, just how creative they would hide the person getting shot, the person getting decapitated.
And you know what? There's Disney films out there that are PG and Land Before Time and Bambi and things. And,
dude,
sad. So they're sad, man. And I guess they're kind of like, oh, well, we'll just make it look like a barbecue. I don't know. Anyway, so we head off to where I just want to talk about that fight between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Dooku, which is one of the first time you see Yoda rocking up with a lightsaber, and like immediately you're like, oh yeah, what's this little guy? Because like they get straight up mullered, they get destroyed by Dooku, don't they? They just can't stand.
Oh yeah. Well, Dooku's got that. Okay, let's touch on Dooku's lightsaber really quick because it also is the first lightsaber we see with like this bent hilt of it all.
Yeah, it's kind of.
which is a tiny bit confusing, only in the sense that like the kyber crystal gets powered by like the laser that goes through it, and that's how it like gets focused into being like a lightsaber. And then with that little crook, I wonder there must be like some sort of like mirror or something. It's like, oh no, beam's there too.
Yeah.
But regardless, it's pretty badass. He's got this whole like downward fencer motion about it, which is I'm assuming why they did that. Because if you've seen a fencing sword, it has like a little bit of a tilted handle as well. It's not
That's
straight
exactly
on.
what I wanted to say, that Dooku was a master fencer, but a fencer of the old school, i.e. he does it the old-fashioned way, whereas Maul is a wild animal and his movements are always animal-like. Again, fighting style is character. Also, sword prop depicting character. The more characters the saga has, the more difficult it is to establish unique weapons that you can distinguish at a glance as theirs. Dooku's was one of those because of the curved hilt.
Yeah.
There really was a unique weapon in Clone Wars, but God, we make a lot of references to Clone Wars, but you kind of have to. It's become an essential supplement.
Well, that's the kind of gooey substance that holds all this together, isn't it? So you've got to keep mentioning it. Yoda, yeah. So he rocks up because Obi-Wan and Anakin get sliced through like a warm knife through butter. Like they don't stand a chance. I like that fight because it's the first, like I said, it's the first time you get to see all the flippy, spinny Yoda stuff. What are your takes on that, guys? You like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's one thing that Star Wars does do appropriately almost every single time, right? They know a good lightsaber fight. So anytime that the lightsaber sparkle, with the exception, of course, 200, Jedis, which should have been better, but whatever. Anytime that you get these guys dueling out with sabers, it's always, yeah, more sabers.
Yeah. It's almost buccaneering kind of that kind of swashbuckling.
That is like a very appropriate way to describe that as well, because I was like, that is a lot like it's kind of like Hook, right? They're all coming like
sword fighting.
Swashbuckling from the very beginning was part of the DNA of Star Wars, and you can't take it out of the equation, or it ceases to be Star Wars. Swashbuckling is indeed the order of the day in these movies.
Yeah, because there's a very pirate-esque, musketeer-esque. It's like it pinches a bit out of all those kind of types of movies. But yeah, so what happens with Yoda and Dooku again? Because I'm trying to remember. Yoda doesn't kill him; he gets away, doesn't he, Dooku?
Yoda doesn't kill him; he gets away, and there's supposed to be a certain personal interaction between the two of them because Dooku was Yoda's own Padawan.
Yeah, that's right.
But as much as the Clone Wars gets into stuff, it doesn't really get into that as much as I'd like. That'd have been nice, because we're talking about a fallen master apprentice relationship that really could have had some dramatic weight and meat in these things. And again, there's just not enough time.
And with Yoda later on meeting Luke, you'd think because obviously he knows who Luke is and who his father was, and having going through what Obi-Wan went through, you'd think he'd give some like real nice, good advice to Luke. Rather, I guess Yoda by that time is kind of senile and he's lost a few of his motors, you could say. But
extraordinarily bitter too.
Yeah,
and he makes a reference to the Phantom Menace. He is too old. Yes, too old to be into trading. Like, he can't believe that Mace Windu said that when Anakin showed up, and now he's throwing that back in Obi-Wan's face.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where you think they'd make the connection there, where it'd be like Yoda's felt that pain with Dooku. You'd think that with Luke, he might have offered a little bit more because he knows what it's like. I don't know. There's something there that doesn't seem right to me. So that's episode 2, isn't it? Pretty much nailed.
For the most part, all of the prelude to the fighting has now been dealt with politically. Now we know why the factions are fighting, because they're just disgusted with the Republic. We know what forces they have to bring to bear, and now it's going to be 3 years of bloody warfare. Had Geonosis ended with a decisive victory, then a lot could have been avoided. But it's like Tora Bora. We got there, we came, we went, we blew things up, we missed our targets. Yeah. And having gotten away, now they can direct the war for years on end and wear us out through attrition.
and this plays on to what I was saying about the technology and the ships and things. It's like the economy would have been fucked, right? They would have had no money. They wouldn't live in a moment of paradise and peace where they could spend exuberant amounts of money on technology and ships and things, which is why the technology starts declining, and that's why by the time you get to sort of A New Hope, you got the bleep bloop bleep bleep kind of buttons and stuff. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but does having obvious buttons depict a decline in technology or just a change in design? Who can say? Certainly, they talk about the economy in this, especially in the Clone Wars, where finally the Galactic Bank is nationalized and it answers directly to Palpatine, and that's one of the last big things he had to get out of the way, because when you run the bank, nobody's going to notice where you funnel the money to build a Death Star, for instance.
Yeah. And that's where like Episode 3 starts taking off, isn't it? It's kind of moving on to the kind of the conclusion. This is where they want to go. This is what they want to do, but it's Palpatine is still kind of hiding in plain sight. So much, in fact, that he hoodwinks the Jedi into him being kidnapped and them having to come and rescue him.
Well, before that, let's talk about hoodwinking the Jedi in a far more general but more important term, because this has to do with the overall arc, leading right up until Luke damns the Jedi for hypocrisy and hubris in the middle of The Last Jedi. As I said, it's the Jedi Order has been corrupt for a while.
Yeah.
But then after Geonosis, Palpatine goes to the Jedi and said, listen, the judicial forces aren't up to this. You guys have to run this army. He's actually doing it on purpose because that puts them in range of his assassins' guns, the clones being his assassins unwittingly.
And it also gets those clones deeper and deeper into what will become enemy lines, Also,
it allows them to train to become an oppressive force of soldiers. But more to the point, it allows Sidious to back the Jedi up against their morals and go, listen, you guys claim to be like goody-goodies and all that, but look what you're doing. Yeah. You're leading slave army in a war. The clones are slaves.
Yeah.
They're technically the property of Camino or of the Republic government, but they're not free people. Yeah. So there's that. Then they're advocating revolution behind the lines, guerrilla warfare. In a story cut from the Clone Wars, but later put in as a novel, they have the Jedi authorizing assassination attempts to try to get Dooku. Now, the moral need in wartime being what it was, what they're doing is more and more unethical.
Yeah.
And so when Luke is saying the legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, hubris, all that means is that Luke has been paying attention.
Yeah.
The conclusion he makes is inaccurate, but we'll get to that when we get to the sequel trilogy. But the point that Luke is making is also being made right here in these prequels.
Yeah. And, I know, Tom, are you okay for a bit, or do you need to step out now? Because I know you got to...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually. I was going to say after we're done with episode 2, I got to step out, just because the kids are getting a little too rambunctious. They don't understand that. I'm like, no, we're doing something really in-depth and something kind of like important. And they're like, no, we don't care. We want your attention. We're young.
Well, you can step out for a bit, leave your microphone on mute if you wanted to, and then come back to see where we're at. But we are just about to dip our toes into episode 3.
Exactly. Where all the meat and potatoes of what we know about what was going to happen in the backstory happens.
I'm going to... Hold on, bud. I'm going to hang up for a few, and if I can get back on, I'm going to back on.
Okay, that's absolutely fine.
I'm back up.
Absolutely
fine.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. I love you, and I'll hopefully see you in a bit.
See you in a bit, buddy.
Take care, Tom.
Bye, guys.
Much love, homie. Okay. So you're saying we're talking about how the way that the Jedi are using this clone army and the methods that they're using are becoming a little bit more unethical and a little more dark than what you would expect from the Jedi, right?
Precisely, largely because, again, Palpatine is presenting the Jedi with series of bad options.
Yeah.
It's either assassinate Dooku or let the war go on further. But assassination is still wrong as the series depicts it.
Yeah.
But what else are they going to do? That's the quandary. And it's easier to go further and further and do more and more immoral or unethical acts if you're able to continue justifying it in yourself. So in a sense, the Jedi as a whole went through an arc similar to Anakin's, similar to Daenerys Targaryen's, for instance, where the exigency justifies some pretty heinous business.
Yeah. Getting your hands dirty to try and make things better. And like this,
and if you feel like you've done bad things in order to make good things happen, have you made good things happen? Or is it all a joke?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Is with Palpatine, he wants to get the job done to his specifications. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what people think. He's got a plan. He's going to do it, and he's going to do it his way. And I guess that's the kind of power of the Sith and the dark side. Is there's no, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to become the darker side? That they're going to do what they're going to do. Whereas with the Jedi, they've got to tiptoe very carefully before things change for them in a bad way.
Well, the Sith regard conventional morality and ethics as something to be walk away from or a thing to be exploited. That's all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, their approach is very practical. What gets things done?
Yeah.
And they're like, you could argue with the deceitfulness of our methods, the brutality of our methods, the heinousness of our methods all day long. They worked, didn't they?
Yeah. And what's better, infiltration or all-out war and losing lots of soldiers? And this is what they did: is they infiltrated the weak spots, and to some degree it worked. Order 66 was a success for the Sith. It changed the tides for them. And it was only by being clever and by being deceitful they managed to get to that point.
And they're like, what do you want us to do? Just take you guys on head to head? We tried that already. It didn't work. Yeah. Deceit works.
It really does, and it did work for them.
And their mind, the only morality is, does it work or not? Is the end achieved or not? The rest of people of the galaxy are just the manure on which their society of the future is going to be grown. That's it.
Yeah. And that's where we start is with deceit on episode 3. When you look at it back, when you know who Palpatine is, you're thinking, oh, this guy's just kidnapped himself. Because there's obviously a plot there. Once you know who Palpatine is, that he's the Emperor, you're thinking, well, it's obviously a trap, isn't it? It's obviously designed.
Which points to the amount of risk addiction that is in his character, too, because he's almost killed at least twice.
Exactly, and he's hiding in plain sight as well. Every single time he speaks to those Jedi, they can put 2 and 2 together and go, he sounds an awful lot like the Emperor, right?
It's what's amazing is that the way Ian uses his voice, particularly in Revenge of the Sith, is as a fine instrument. No matter what you could say of anyone else, Ian McDiarmid knows exactly what kind of film he's in, knows exactly what kind of performance is needed for the film he's in, and exactly how to deliver it.
It's almost Christian Bale-esque, isn't it, with The Dark Knight? He's kind of like, this is Batman, and this is Bruce Wayne. He's kind of got that suaveness to him.
Well, prior to his getting his face messed up at the end of the second act, all he does in order to be Sidious is just be himself with a slightly darker register. It hasn't been fully frogged out, as it were, until all the lightning business, which we'll eventually get to. But right now, it's very, almost mild-mannered. It's, I'm not the person you could possibly expect me to be, this bad person.
Very aristocratic.
When your back is looking, it sounds like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite horrible.
And yes, he is, in fact, an aristocrat.
Yeah, so he's got that real pompous sound about him. Yeah.
But also just a little bit like, a stiff breeze would blow him over. This guy couldn't possibly be the guy.
Yeah. So so we start off with that it was Grievous that was meant to be holding Palpatine on his ship as a prisoner, and they're going to rescue Dooku. Palpatine, and then they rock up, and then there's Palpatine there with Dooku and Grievous.
And just like before the film begins in medias res with a battle over Coruscant that we don't see start, a kidnapping that we don't see happen.
Yes.
Unless you watch the Getty Tartakovsky animated stuff.
Yeah.
Is that still canon? I don't know, but it's pretty good filler, and it tells the story. By the way, Palpatine has this weird fetish of watching battles happen from the comfort of a chair.
Yeah, that's one of
he has a sort of arsonist's need to look at the harm he makes happen from a distance and just sit in it.
It's also it's almost like a competition for him, you know, like who's gonna, like you were saying about that tree that needs to be protected by the greatest swordsman. Like if somebody can knock him over, then he will be his next knight. You know.
Yes. Now let's get to that. That is most important. In fact, the Clone Wars say that this is not the first time that this has happened. Sidious deliberately engineers a situation that requires Anakin and Dooku to be in the same room together.
Yes.
Dooku, his current apprentice, Darth Tyrannus, and Anakin, hopefully the apprentice to be.
Yeah.
If he can kill Dooku.
And that's exactly what happens. Obi-Wan gets knocked out. They have this amazing duel, him and Dooku, and he ended up in between two lightsabers between either side of his head.
And who is Palpatine rooting for? Neither one. You have to have a certain amount of detachment. If Dooku wins, then he was meant to win, and Anakin wasn't strong enough after all. If Anakin does win, it just means that Palpatine was right about him.
And this is what I was talking about Palpatine and playing a very dangerous game, because it's at this moment when I noticed that Palpatine, he drops it down just a little bit. He's kind of like, take the blow. Do you want to kill him? How do you feel about it? You know, he's kind of like, he's almost getting
good,
excited.
Anakin, good. Kill him. Kill him now.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah, and that for me would be like, you know, Anakin's a clever guy. He's not a fucking idiot. Like, and
just as Plinkett has said, at no point does Anakin say, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, exactly. And it's at this point I'm thinking, what would you reckon would have happened if Anakin would have found out who Palpatine was at that moment?
Were I in charge? Well, it just goes to show you that you need to be what that says is you need to kind of mindful about the behavior you have. Again, it's to kind of keep you from becoming a Daenerys, a check on yourself, as if to say maybe burning King's Landing isn't necessary in order to get the city to surrender, you know? Yeah. And at no point does Daenerys ask herself, what am I doing? I should pull this dragon over and calm down and eat a Snickers, take a deep breath, something. Anakin doesn't do that. He lets the gentle, steady pressure that Palpatine has been putting on him for God knows how long now, 13 years, I guess, reach their culmination, and he says, do it. And Anakin doesn't hesitate. Which, by the way, is the fundamental choice that summarizes all the other differences and choices that I've been talking about between these two trilogies. At the end of the day, it comes down to one of these Skywalkers having a completely defenseless person, unable to defend themselves at all, at their mercy. They can kill or not kill them. Yeah. Anakin is told to kill and does it. Luke is told to kill by the same person and doesn't.
And, you know, do you think at that point that there should, because like there's a lot of moments in these movies where Yoda is kind of like, you'll see him sat there by himself, something will happen, and he'll be like, and he'll feel that. Was there a moment in that film where Yoda was kind of like, he does this and he can notice the kind of a change in the Force when he kills Dooku? Because they kind of just breeze over it, don't they? And unfortunately, yeah.
Oh, if we're talking about when Dooku dies? Yeah. No, they don't go into that at all. Yes. What Yoda feels about it, what Mace Windu feels, well, Mace Windu is like good riddance.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we just got to kill Grievous.
Yeah, I guess it's conceit, isn't it? It's not like it was like it would just be like
Yoda's mind is elsewhere. The events of the Clone Wars have kind of gotten him to think maybe we're not in the right. He is asking himself, what am I doing? He is asking himself questions. Yeah. But that's something that the series covers and not the film. But it does affect Yoda's thinking in this film. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, and then of course we find out we breezed over like episode 2 very quickly. We forgot the fact that they actually got married, Anakin and Padme. So like obviously they come back, and Padme tells Anakin that she's pregnant, right?
Yeah, they have spent the last 3 years being married, but not
Secretly.
in name.
Yeah.
And stealing what moments they can together, with him generally away fighting the war and her in the capital trying desperately to keep the whole thing from collapsing.
Yeah.
And that is a tremendous strain on them, because if you build a relationship on lies, you're building on sand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's stressful, very stressful.
And as Anakin, as Padme points out in episode 2, could you live a lie like that? Could I? They try, but the fact that they're living on a lie, just as the Jedi are living on a lie, just as the galaxy as a whole is operating under a lie, we're seeing the effect of lies and dishonesty and corruption at the macro and the micro level, and it registers in terms of character in this marriage that isn't a marriage.
Yeah. And of course, Grievous gets away at the beginning there as well. Obviously, that plays into the rest of the movie at the end of the movie. Well, towards,
because he's still the boogeyman that Palpatine dangles in front of the galaxy to have him go booga booga booga, so the galaxy can go, oh no, not the booga booga! Please save us from the booga booga. Have these increased political powers.
Yeah, and let's use all our resources over there rather than over here.
And Palpatine goes, oh no, I couldn't possibly. Well, all right.
Yeah, and then Palpatine appoints Anakin as his informant. Do you think Yoda's like, oh no, he didn't? How dare you do that? It's not your place to do that. That's the tension between Palpatine and the Jedi Council, right?
Which is part of a larger scene that probably shouldn't have been cut, but was, where Palpatine is having voted in more amendments to the Security Act, where he gets absolute now control over the Jedi Council and every soldier the Jedi Council controls, which means all the clones.
All the clones. Yeah.
That puts him in a spectacular political position. Now that he has control of the council, he can order Anakin to be his personal representative on it, and the council has to take it.
Yeah. And, you know, the tension that's relayed from the Jedi Council to Anakin's face, like Obi-Wan's even like, he can't do that. Like, okay, enjoy it while you got it, but you shouldn't have done that, mate, you know? And is it at that point where he has to be made a Jedi Master?
He never gets made one, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, he's
the novelization also makes it sound like if Anakin were given mastership, he could go in certain parts of the archives that might tell him more about how to help Padme, because that's already on his mind by then. Yeah. And the fact that they won't give him mastership means it feeds into that larger, more central issue with him. But what this is meant to do is exactly what it does. Palpatine's using this to drive a lever between Anakin and the Jedi, and he's been doing that since the very beginning, step by step, little drop by little drop.
Planting
gentle, steady pressure.
Yeah,
until it finally achieves critical mass, as it does in this film.
And it really does. It really does. It starts getting more and more and more and more with Palpatine as well, isn't it? Because obviously he knows. I think he knows deep down. Once he does that, once he pushes that button and goes the one place he knows the Jedi won't let him, then he kind of knew that they'd send Anakin in to spy on him.
By the way, that's another sign of the larger issue where the Jedi religion just is depicted as not being satisfying enough, is it? If it were, surely Anakin wouldn't be having these problems. He wouldn't be questioning being in this order. Neither would Dooku have, or Ponkrell, or Barriss Offee, or any of the characters that leave the Jedi Order during the war because they just can't reconcile it with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And even when Anakin goes to Yoda and go, what do I do about these visions I'm having about a friend of mine that I can't talk about dying for a reason I can't say? All Yoda can tell him is basic philosophical, let go of everything you fear to lose.
Yeah.
But that's not enough in that moment.
which is, I guess,
the Jedi religion isn't enough in this crucial moment to make the difference to stay Anakin's hand.
And do you think that's where Luke has it right, where he's kind of like, well, maybe there are a few things we need to change here? Because
absolutely. In fact, both the classic trilogy and the sequel trilogy go into a lot more depth about how he learns these lessons. But we have to get the lessons established first, and that's what the prequels are for.
Because that's what happens when you repress someone's anger and their fear. That's what happens. They snap like a fucking dry ball. You know, it's kind of like you need to kind of in some way establish that you have a problem before you can. You know.
Exactly. Anakin is a ticking time bomb, and the Jedi don't see it because prophecy, that's another part of their corruption. Yeah. But at the same time, the rationale is that time bomb or not, it may not have had a lit fuse if they'd been better at this.
Yeah.
If what they were offering was more nourishing to him.
They needed to grow with the times, didn't they? You know, and they didn't, and this is what happens. They decayed.
And then here comes Palpatine offering Anakin tasty junk food in a time when he's just being given rice cakes.
Exactly. And that's when you get Palpatine inviting him to the opera and sitting in a dark chair and talking to him about, well, there are ways you can save someone from death.
In a scene which is probably the best scene, not in just this movie, but in all three of these movies, perhaps.
Yes.
The mood is perfect. Lighting is perfect. The music is perfect. The performances are perfect.
Yeah.
Particularly Ian's. Ian is given a moment to shine in a fantastic monologue that does him justice and sets up, yes, perhaps even the events in episode 9. Who knows?
And it's so, like, Anakin is so desperate to save his wife that he doesn't even question how I think he does briefly say, how would you know about this? You know, but like for a Jedi, he should be like, hold on. There's something here. Like, but he's so desperate to save his wife. He's kind of like, he wants to hear what he has to say.
Again, he's not being mindful. He's not going, why do you know so much about the Sith? Why are you burning down King's Landing? Why are you doing this? Why am I doing this? Yeah. Not seeing the thing in front of your nose, as I guess Yoda would put it.
Yeah.
And he can't because he's been primed not to see it, to not see. Not that the Emperor has no clothes, because it's not that kind of Emperor, but rather that the Emperor has no conscience.
Yeah. And in typical Star Wars fashion, well, more fashion throughout this kind of the prequels. You've got Obi-Wan going to check out Grievous, and you've got Yoda going to the Wookiee planet because they're having trouble as well. And you get that scene, by the way, with Obi-Wan, where he sits and he listens to their plotting. He finds out there's a problem, and he feels like he's got to do something. And rather than be sneaky, and rather than he's very obnoxious in my eyes. He's kind of just jumps down. He's like, "Hello," and they all turn around and he's got to fight them all. And I was kind of like that scene for me was a bit odd. What did you think?
It was an attempt to kind of call back to Alec Guinness going, "Hello there," in episode 4. Yeah. And then the Clone Wars makes it even more elaborate, where it starts, chronologically speaking, with Grievous doing it to him.
Yeah.
And then him in Revenge of the Sith doing it back to Grievous. And then I guess he picks it up as a tick and then does it to Luke 19 years later.
Yeah.
Hello there.
Hello there.
It's just one of the ways in which we try to apply performance spackle so that Ewan McGregor fits more and more in with Alec Guinness, and James Arnold Taylor fits in with both.
Yeah. Can you explain Grievous to me in a bit more detail? Because Grievous is one that always confuses me. Because he's half man, half droid that's apparently learned the ways of the Jedi, and all he does is he spins lightsabers really quickly.
He's some tin pot warlord character that some either Tyrannus or Sidious dug up. And the truth is that having lost Darth Maul, if Sidious hadn't found Grievous, he would have had to invent him. And he kind of did, in the sense that he gave Grievous cybernetic attachments. He's not Anakin, he's not human, but he's humanoid, although I guess he's a reptile. But he has these Vader-like additions to him. And just like Vader, it affects his breathing.
Yeah.
And gives him like a really bad cough.
Yeah, he does. Oh, he has a proper smoker's cough. A bit like me at the moment with this flu.
He's meant to represent Vader, but not perfected. And as I said, he's meant to be the boogeyman of the war.
Do you reckon he is an experiment? He's what's happened when he's kind of experimented with things, and if in fact he is like the Darth Vader 0.5, because he's experimented with like ways of keeping someone alive with animatronic, you know. Arms. More
or less, yes.
Yes, you feel like if it wasn't for Grievous, there would be no Vader. That's the point I'm trying to make. There you go.
Well, yeah, the implication from the start is that what they did to Grievous was just a practice run for what they did to Vader. As I say, in terms of character, he's just meant to be the big scary thing that jumps in front of the public and scares them enough to want to keep this war going until he's toast. Until the Republic is toast.
Yeah. And it's all built...
He's the thing that distracts him so that people don't ask themselves, wait a minute, what am I doing?
Yeah. And it was quite intense, you know. And I was wondering at the point when he's spinning those lightsabers, you know, I was kind of like, oh, okay, how's he going to deal with this? Like, you know, it was quite an intense battle. And
is he force sensitive? Not really. I don't get the sense his count isn't that big. But you can learn fighting disciplines and hold your own against a Jedi if you're really good at those disciplines, I guess is what they're trying to say.
To wait for your moment. Yeah, that's it. And of course, like, you got Yoda on the Wookiee planet. And it's at that moment they get the Order 66, right?
Yes. Now, Order 66 was definitely elaborated on in the Clone Wars. Basically speaking, when the Order was placed with the Kaminoans in the first place, they said, we're going to need a couple of backup plans with these guys that you're making for us. Because what if the Jedi should go rogue? We're intending the Jedi to command these guys, but what if they go rogue? Don't you need a kind of measure in place? Why not Order 66, which is implied to be one of a series of orders given to the clones in case of this or that emergency, and it's put into them via some kind of biochip so that even if they have free will, they won't use it in that one crucial moment that they've been made for.
And this is where you were saying before, where, you know, all the plotting and you know, all these tiny little chess movements that they've made, let the Republic make. You know, they've made it by themselves. They were like, okay, we need a clone army here, and we need a clone army here. No. And eventually, what they've done,
the Republic itself, by the way, accepts an army of clone slaves when they could have just levied their own defense forces and brought them together under unified command. What's that all about?
Exactly.
It paints the Republic in a bad moral light too.
And do you think like the clones were like, it can't be like a chip in the head that suddenly switches sides? They've got to have known the whole time what Order 66 was, and when they heard it, that's when they were...
What the show makes clear is that they're aware of it at a subconscious level, but not at a conscious level, unless one of the chips fritzes by accident, which is exactly what happens in the show.
Okay.
But assuming that nothing goes wrong with them, then exactly when Palpatine decides is the right time, he can get on the horn with them and say, execute Order 66. And at a subconscious level that they can't really say no to, or what am I doing to, they'll go, okay.
Yeah. It's almost like a sleeper agent, right? You know, like
a Manchurian candidate type of thing, which was mostly come up with to address the fact that by the time the Clone Wars had run its course as a series, we'd really gotten to like these clones as characters. Yeah. So the idea that they would just go, okay, and not have some extra help and shoot generals that they've gotten to know and help very closely over 3 years, story time, bit hard to swallow, even though they were made genetically to be extra obedient. A little helping hand in terms of this chip, just to make sure.
And you see that in this part of the movie with Obi-Wan, where he's joking around with the stormtroopers.
Mm-hmm. He's joking around with Commander Cody, and not 1 second later,
they're shooting at him. Yeah.
Up, fire away, boom, boom.
Yeah, and that must have been really horrible to kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what the how and the why and the where, and just jump. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, you got to wonder, did the clones ever then go, wait a minute, what just happened.
Yeah, I guess at that point that's it. They're just almost like the droids. They're controlled, like, you know, that's the point where they become automized.
And we may yet see how that plays out, because the Clone Wars is getting an actual finale, one that's set in Order 66 time. So we may see what Rex or we know what Cody does, what Rex or any of the surviving Dominoes or what have you have to say about getting this order.
Yeah.
We know some of the clones actually become aware of the chip and get it out of their heads before the order comes in.
Okay. Well, let's get back to Anakin. Anakin is Palpatine reveals his naughty side to Anakin, and Anakin's like, I'm telling on you, and he runs to get Mace Windu. Him and Mace Windu come up to Palpatine's flat or his apartment, and that's when the fight between Mace Windu and Palpatine or Darth Sidious happens, and it's quite iconic that fight. I feel like he really, Mace Windu definitely underestimated Palpatine or Darth Sidious. He thought he had him.
Well, you could just get in line on that score. Sheesh.
Yeah. He thought he had him beat. He was cowering in the corner. That was obviously a play to try and get Anakin to help.
But it again points to his risk addiction, because really he could have been killed there. There was no guarantee that Anakin was going to help him. Did he predict it to that level of clarity?
Yeah,
I got nothing to worry about.
But that's the kind of a trait of a Jedi, isn't it? Arrogance, you know. He's kind of like, oh, I'm right.
No, I mean Sidious is being arrogant. He's just,
that's what I mean.
That no one is gonna, that Mace Windu's not gonna make that stroke.
I think at that moment,
or that Anakin's gonna get there in time.
I think the point they were trying to make with that is that Sidious had put that many breadcrumbs and that many seeds in Anakin's head. He knew where he had him. He's been playing.
I guess what I'm really saying is that there's something in Palpatine that likes to put himself in danger, and he gets off on it.
I bet he does, the kinky bitch. But yeah, obviously, and this scene always it triggered something when all this this talk about the Last Jedi and Snoke and who's Snoke and stuff like that. I was thinking, oh, you didn't see Mace Windu actually die. You get him see his arm chopped off and electrocuted and thrown out of a window, but you don't actually see him die until I see a corpse. Mace Windu's still alive. What are your thoughts on that?
Gravity is a heartless bitch.
Hold on, give me a second. I'm just going to grab some juice from my vape. Give me 2 seconds.
Go right ahead. I'll try to fill in the time. I don't know how Mace could possibly have survived that fall.
Yeah, but the same could be said for Darth Maul, couldn't it, really? Yeah?
Granted, but then you don't think in those terms until they present you with a living Darth Maul and go, yeah, I know, he's back. Funny, right?
How did that happen? What the fuck? Shouldn't be smoking.
There's an illustration to be made about Mace Windu's body just sitting there broken at the bottom of like the street, and the cops are all gathered around and going, I don't know what happened.
Is that Samuel L. Jackson? What the fuck? Okay, so then we have another really powerful scene where
you're fulfilling your destiny, Anakin.
You will no longer be known as Anakin Skywalker.
And that's what they think, mind you. They think that when you're casting off your actual name of birth, you are no longer Alex Whiteley. You might go by the name of Alex Whiteley for purposes of dealing with the outside profane world, but the truth of yourself is not that name. The truth of yourself is something different, someone different. The truth of you is the name that your master gives you.
Yeah, I guess.
Now, the first thing that I should mention is that, yes, Anakin kills Mace Windu. Now, while we can argue about how close Anakin and Mace Windu were to each other, particularly by the end, what that speaks to is that as far as the Sith are concerned, if you want to become an apprentice, the thing you have to do is walk away from your previous life. And you have to kill or destroy something or someone that was important to you from your previous life to signify your commitment to the Sith.
Do you think it matters kind of, do you think it makes a difference kind of who you were before that? Because like, obviously with Anakin, he was this well-respected Jedi. I had to do something really horrendous to kind of erase that.
All that who you are has impact on is the choice you make, I guess, when it comes to what personal thing you destroy or kill. Anakin kills Mace Windu. Dooku arranges the death of his friend Sifo Dyas, is what we're led to believe. The Darth Plagueis novel, I'll mention that one more time, has Sidious killing his entire family with his bare hands, practically, in order to walk away and join the Sith and earn his place as a Sith. Is
it something that the Masters select? Like Snoke going, Ben Solo, you need to kill your father. Like, do you reckon?
That's what I want to get to when we get to the sequel trilogy. So much about The Force Awakens would make more sense if, in fact, they were Sith, and if Rise of Skywalker says correctly that Sidious is involved, then maybe Ben Solo is in his way a Sith, because then he's following the logic of a Sith. Yeah. He's murdering his father in order to demonstrate his commitment to Snoke and the cause, and the father, someone he supposedly love and value.
Yeah.
Is a perfect sort of indicator of, I'm willing to go this far. Yeah. Make me a Sith.
And we still don't know.
And then to have Snoke throw that in his face and go, you messed it up. No wonder Ben Solo snaps and kills Snoke in that movie. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, we will.
In any event, Anakin proves his commitment to the Sith cause. Sidious gives him a Sith name that he thinks represents the truth of inner Anakin, Darth Vader. The Darth is more of a title thing than a name thing. It's like, it means, I guess, the mortal one who is Vader, the immortal one who is Sidious, Insidious, the immortal one who is Tyrannus, the tyrannical one. Go on and on.
Yeah, and he does that by killing the younglings, as we all know. He takes the Jedi Palace, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, he leads the attempt to bring down the temple while so many other Jedi are distracted on the front lines. Who notices when Anakin marches in there with a few detachments and just says, yes, what I want is more important at this moment than the lives of these children. And what I want is Padme. And the way to Padme is through these kids. These kids are toast.
Yeah.
Again, he is not asking, what am I doing? He's asking, will this give me back the thing that I selfishly want to keep?
Yeah, and then and obviously he declares himself as the ruler of the empire. He comes in, he's like,
it's a quite more of a selfish and self-interested fall than Luke's fall is, as depicted in The Last Jedi, and another way of displaying the differences between those two characters, as Anakin being largely selfish, Luke largely selfless. But again, we'll get to that.
I think Luke is more naive. There's a lot of naivety there. It's kind of like it's a bit of a weakness for Luke.
Most certainly, but done in at least positive ends, as opposed to the naivete that Anakin has, which is the naivete of believing that this old man actually is his friend.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's how deception works, isn't it? But it's the fact that he's like, he knew where he had Anakin. He knew right where at that moment that it was his, and that's.
And by the way, how did Palpatine know that the Anakin was worried about Padme dying?
I don't know, and this is what makes me feel about like reading people's minds and foresight, seeing into the future and things like this, because like Darth Vader has foresight. He dreams about Padme dying. He can see into the future in certain respects. So why can't Palpatine is far more superior, far more powerful, have that same vision?
The old canon as much as hinted that Sidious put those visions in Anakin's head.
Ooh.
Certainly now that would be one way of getting him to worry about that in order to move him.
It's good motivator.
Especially at a time when all of these other things are falling into place. He's got total control of the Jedi Council and the army. He's got total control of the banks. He's got total control of pretty much everything he needs. All he has to do now is just clean up, kill the Jedi.
It reminds me of an episode of Bewitched, when they walk in and like, ding, fireplace, ding, dim lighting, ding, Barry White and let's sex this thing up, He knows the right moves to pull, and that's how he knows where he's got Anakin at that precise moment, which is almost why I think he was so arrogant with the Mace Windu thing,
And timing is everything with this man and in this sort of affair that he's doing, and so he is as much an instinctive creature as Qui-Gon in his way. He's very sensitive to what's going on around him. How else do you read political opponents?
Exactly.
Or even your friends.
So the switch from the Senate to the Empire, obviously a very important moment in the whole saga, because this is where things get meaty. He has complete control over everything. There's no Senate vote. He now gets to choose where they go, what they do, and how they do it.
Not true. Well, not true on paper. The Senate is there as a rubber stamp, and will remain as a rubber stamp as the Imperial Senate for another 19 years until it's disbanded between Rogue One and New Hope. We'll get into that when we get to the classic films. But the senators are largely made to understand that their job is to be a rubber stamp, to applaud, get paid, go home.
Yeah.
Except for the members of the opposition prior to that point who are either weeded out or given the message, just be play acting at this stuff.
Yeah.
Don't you ever actually mean it, or we'll come for you.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the rebellion comes from. You know, it's kind of like you can't be a part of this. This is a bigger machine than you. We're going to shame you. We're going to kick you out. We're going to call you a rebel. Bye. And
that's kind of where I'm sad that Bail Organa didn't have as much of a role in the prequels as he probably ought to have. And the Clone Wars addresses this too. If I had a nickel for every time I said that at this point, if I had a drink for every time I said that, I'd die of alcohol poisoning by now. But yes, there's a whole subplot cut from episode 3 involving Mon Mothma, involving Bail Organa becoming disaffected at last with this sort of halvesies, sort of republic, but not quite, sort of a dictatorship, but not quite, and go, we need to kind of call Palpatine to account. And when that fails, they say, all right, we're obviously going to have to arm force this, but it'll take 20 years.
And how did that work out for him and his planet?
Which, by the way, is one more reason why I take exception to the idea that The Last Jedi and Force Awakens somehow have ruined the happy ending lives of these characters we've come to love. Because really, every plan that Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Bail Organa come up with in the last third of The Force Awakens, not Force Awakens, Revenge of the Sith, goes to absolute shit in the first half of The New Hope.
Absolutely.
And no one complains.
No, they don't. Okay, so then we have Obi-Wan. He finds Padme amidst all this drama, all the explosions, and the Jedi Council being taken over, and everything's going crazy. And he informs Padme of what's happening with Anakin, which she breaks her heart, right? Absolutely breaks her heart.
She is exhausted by this point, although she'd not admit it to herself. She has been pulled and burned on both ends. This double life she's been living, this lie of a life, has exhausted her. Trying to keep everything together in terms of the Republic has exhausted her. That's before we even get to the physical stresses of being pregnant and then giving birth to a child, let alone raising one.
Yeah, and little children
Padme is exhausted by this.
God knows what midichlorians do to women when they're pregnant with them.
They don't cover that, but does it affect how many you have per cell? Because that's really the only metric that they really care about.
Yeah. Because there's both Leia and Luke in there. So he uses her as a Trojan horse, really, doesn't he? He's kind of like. He tells her not to go find him, but he knows she will, right?
In a series of unpleasant choices, he's presented with the ultimate choice: either keep Padme alive and keep what he wants and leave the Jedi Order. Either lose Padme or kill a bunch of kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Either is a bad choice. Which one is the worst one? That's Palpatine's tactic, as I said from the very beginning with episode 1. Now here it is writ large and it's most personal.
Yes.
And now, as you say, Obi-Wan's presented with a bunch of bad choices. Kill Anakin or let Anakin live and become the generalissimo of a really bad guy.
Well, he knows what Anakin's capable of as well. And I guess he thinks in Sidious's hands he could be used as a really extremely bad weapon. So he knows.
Now, it points again to how far they've fallen, because their first impulse is not, let's see if we can help this guy, get him out of this, talk some sense into him, make him come to Jesus. the first thing they go to is, we got to kill him, put him out of his misery.
Yeah.
And they stay locked in that moral mistake, which is kind of exemplar of the fact that they've been making moral mistakes for 13 years for the rest of the saga up until Jedi, where they're like to Luke, go kill Vader. Do I really want to? What am I doing here?
Yeah. And amidst this, you've got the grudge match between Yoda and Darth Sidious.
Which is handled far better than the Dooku Yoda fight in Episode 2.
Absolutely. I
believe Yoda's moves better than I believe them in Episode 2. The choreography fits better.
That scene where Yoda walks through and there's the two knights at the side of the door and he's just like, bam, gone. He just straight up just nails him as he walks through the door. But
that's not the amazing thing. The amazing thing in that scene is that his vice president stand-in, Masamita, says nothing. And even more, says nothing when his boss starts shooting lightning out of his fingers a minute later. He just calmly walks out of the room and says, I'll leave this to you guys, which points out something else about the politics of this as far as George Lucas is concerned. Palpatine was always kind of a Nixon figure in Lucas's mind from the time he started writing Star Wars. And so this thing with Masamita where he just calmly accepts the fact that his master shoots lightning out of his fingers just means that a whole lot of characters in this trilogy in particular have to be asked the classic Nixonian question. What did you know? And when did you know it? Yeah, when did you know that your boss shoots lightning out of his fingers?
I guess it's self-preservation at that point, isn't it? Keep your mouth shut, you might just stay alive, you know? Yeah, I think.
Plus, it says a lot about what Masamita is like as a character. Did he know everything from the beginning? Was he snuck into the government as a Trojan agent a long time ago, and now they're working together now that Palpatine is in charge? And
I guess in that situation, you've got to be you've got to be kind of have some sort of know-how what's going on, because otherwise you'd question what the decisions that were made.
From the very beginning of the saga with the novelization to Star Wars in 1976, it says Palpatine was helped to power by ruthless, unfeeling, and opportunistic helpers.
Yeah, and that's where that comes from. What do you think about the fight between Yoda and Sidious then? The throwing of the cubicles that and this, there was so much going on. It was a really epic fight. You got Yoda jumping around, spinning around with his lightsaber. They got them throwing the Senate cubicles at each other.
So then I threw the Senate at him. The whole Senate. True story.
Yeah. I love that. Yoda,
as I say, that's better choreographed, executed better in terms of digital effects.
Yeah.
Ian throws his all into it in a way that I didn't see with Dooku in Episode 2.
Yeah, the Emperor, he's just too much for Yoda. Absolutely too much. He's having fun. He's enjoying that. He's like the way he's throwing those cubicle things at him. The circle.
He is having the happiest day, isn't he? Just having a wonderful time
as he's throwing all these things. Yeah, you know,
he's cackling like a fiend, and he's like, "Aw, that's sweet. He's in such a good mood."
Yeah,
according to the novelization, Yoda realizes at this point that not only is he not ready to fight the Sith, but the Sith had been training to fight a different war for 1,000 years, and he's been trying to fight the same old war from 1,000 years ago, and that doesn't fly.
Yeah.
Great powers always kind of stumble when they keep trying to fight the last war when they should be fighting the present one.
Which is why this theory of the Grey Jedi kind of illustrates to me that maybe, you know, Luke has got a point. Like, there are some things you can't do and some things we've got to do. You know, like people are raging about this emo Luke Skywalker that we've got now, but you're thinking, well, look, he's paying attention to what's happened in the past. He knows how it's going to end if you carry on running down the yellow brick road as been told by past Jedi. You know, he knows that things are going to change, and I think that is the pivotal moment there. Like Sidious,
he says no to Jedi teachings basically in Return of the Jedi when he refuses to kill his father.
Yeah.
And when he's refusing to do that, he's not just refusing Sidious. He's refusing Yoda. He's refusing Obi-Wan. He's refusing what the Jedi have trained him to do for 3 or more years. Kill Vader, because that's the only way they can think of to end the war.
Yeah.
But again, he's asking, what am I doing here? So yes, as both the classic films and the sequel trilogy make clear, Luke is learning lessons from these corrupt old fogies.
Yeah.
And he, in the end, says no to them.
Yeah. And of course, Yoda gets completely overpowered by Sidious, and he has to go into exile, as he says. I don't know why he chooses to go into exile rather than train a new breed of Jedi. Maybe you can elaborate on that, why he feels
from childhood. I can only imagine that that's something that he had to do because he wasn't planning to do this larger, more elaborate storyline when he wrote A New Hope. The original drafts for A New Hope make it clear that this wasn't the direction it was originally intended to take. They even adapted that original script to comic book form, and it's absolutely clear. The notion that Luke was supposed to be watched over by his aunt and uncle and from afar by Obi-Wan, and that's why he's in that desert to begin with. That's something that came up. It's like the forensics where I talk about trying to explain why the axe got into the wall and the thing at the Norwegian camp.
Yeah.
He's kind of forced to do that. He's at this last couple of 20 minutes of the film, he's forced to do a lot of mop-up.
Why is Yoda this senile, bumbling fool at the beginning of,
well, that's to test Luke's patience and see just how much horseshit he's willing to put up with and be patient about in order to get the job done here. But that's a later thing.
Yeah, we'll cover that. We'll cover that in part 2 of this series. Okay, so then we come up to the pinnacle, the absolute climax of this movie, and that's the fight to the death between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. Now, he turns up on what's the planet called? I always call it the Fire Planet.
Mustafar.
Yeah, he's meant to what's Obi-Wan's mission again? Just to kill everyone there and to hide their secrets, right?
Well, just kill Anakin because Anakin's got to be put down like a mad dog now, friend or no friend. Yeah. Anakin's there because he's there to kill what's left of the Separatist leadership because there's no need for them now. Their usefulness is ended. Yeah. Plus, dead men tell no tales.
And that scene where Padme gets out the ship, and then you see kind of Obi-Wan, he's kind of positioning himself behind her, like trying to look as powerful as ever. And it's almost like a soap opera. Oh, no, he didn't, you know.
And in which Anakin does the join me thing to Padme, and I'm not sure entirely how well he does it. My argument is that the join me scene is done best in The Last Jedi, but that's for performance reasons.
Yeah, of course.
Both take place in embers of fire floating around, by the way, but absolutely. That's, again, just asserting patterns.
Yeah.
In the end, Padme says no. Obi-Wan's like, no.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? And of course, the thing that Anakin does to prove that he's pretty much in total King's Landing mode is to do the one thing he's most famous for in the classic trilogy. He chokes people out.
Do you think that's what killed her, though, or do you think it was she just had enough?
If that were what killed her, then she would have been dead the instant he let go, and that's all there'd be to it. But no, she survives long enough to give birth to 2 twins and then die of a broken heart?
Yeah, that's another vague thing. But that fight for me...
We'll get to that, though, because there is some symmetry there. But first, the fight.
The fight is perfect. I don't think there's a lightsaber fight that... I think maybe the final scene between...
I have issues of pacing with that.
You feel?
It may perhaps have gone on just a skosh too long for my taste, but it is just my taste.
The scene when they're on the levitating blocks was a bit... I guess.
And by the way, speaking of, you want to complain about Carrie Poppins not being in line with physics? Here's another thing. I'm going to read you from one of the old canon reference books.
Yes, please do.
Get this, your head will blow up. It says, Obi-Wan and Anakin use the Force to create cocoons of moderate temperature around themselves as they battle on the lava river. What? Anakin is horrendously burned by the hellish vapors once his injuries prevent him from maintaining his Force shield against the heat. So you're able to swallow the fact that Anakin and Obi-Wan can use the Force to protect themselves from absolutely scorching lava when they're standing right on top of it, but you're not prepared to accept that Leia, as equally, if not more important a character, can use the Force just long enough to not die in a vacuum.
Yes. Eric, I love you so much. This is why I'm so happy to be doing this with you, because you can do that. You can pull it right back to the original source. So anybody that's upset about Leia floating back from
I'm just saying the precedent is there, and if we're going to say that the precedent didn't bother us, why are we saying this does?
Yeah, exactly. So it's good that we've gone back to the beginning and discussed these things, so that it explains the things that happen later on in the sequels. Okay, so the higher ground thing. Anakin, I have the high.
He's got to get beaten somehow.
Yeah, yes.
Something's got to get those limbs off.
Yeah, it was a bad move. It was a bad move because Obi-Wan's he is a great lightsaber fighter, and I don't know. Yeah, like you said, he's got to be beaten somehow. I liked it. I liked how he just turned around and left his friend burning in the lava river. He betrayed Obi-Wan. You know, he betrayed.
But he did grab that saber.
No, he didn't.
Again, that's forensics. You have to account for the fact that it's in his trunk in his house in New Hope. So, again, get the axe onto the wall. Yeah. Notice, by the way, that's the important saber that becomes important to Luke first and then to Rey in the sequel trilogy. But we never see it forged. We never see any great importance attached to it. It was made in between episodes 2 and 3, but we never see him make it.
Yeah, because
in the Ring Cycle, the forging of Notung by Siegfried gets you like a 20-minute musical sequence. Not here.
Yeah, because he loses it, doesn't he? Oh, Obi-Wan's going to kill me. Yeah, that's right.
But, you're mad that he throws it off a cliff when the fact is that the sword isn't treated with the importance of Excalibur to begin with.
Well, imagine the amount of hate. After, like, Obi-Wan's been, Luke has been sat on that island for so many years, learning about all of these things that have happened, and then she rocks up. Rey rocks up with this lightsaber that he's learned to fucking hate, and she hands it to him. No wonder he throws it away.
There's ways to logic out these decisions in ways that come across sensibly. I really challenge the notion that Luke in The Last Jedi is somehow different than other incarnations of the character. But again, that's for a later discussion.
We'll do that.
We got to wrap up some prequel shit.
Yeah, we do. We're going to wrap this up now with the creation of Darth Vader as we know it. Palpatine finds him. He's like, "Oh, Schnookums, did you lose? Oh, I guess we must help him." And of course, they put all on his suit. They work on him to make him survive.
And then the axe is firmly planted in the wall in the Norwegian camp. He is in the Vader suit, and James Earl Jones is doing the voice. Regretfully, I'd have given him different lines, but okay.
I was about to say the no thing was a bit daft. But
Where
Palpatine,
Padme?
You killed her. I'm afraid you killed her. That was it.
Which really gets him out of a bind because he would have had to do some tap dancing. Otherwise, he would have been forced to produce like a manual on how to save people from dying during childbirth. Yeah. Which I would have demanded minute one before I even turned. It's like, I want to see the receipts. Can you actually do this trick? Yeah, here's the textbook. How to save people from dying during childbirth. Chapter 1, how to save... Son of a bitch.
Absolutely. I like that scene. That is such a beautiful image of the helmet clipping on, and you see all the dust in the air, and it gets sucked in, and then the first it blows away. That's one of the most iconic for me. That's one of the most iconic scenes in movie history.
Because at this point, you were waiting to see it for
that's it. Isn't it,
nearly 20 years at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think they did a bad thing with it. The whole no thing was a bit daft.
It's a choice.
It's a choice, but then you get obviously the birth scene with the Luke.
But it, by the way, makes sense if you were to imagine it as whiny Anakin saying it under the James Earl Jones narrator.
Yeah, I guess.
No, again, it makes sense. Now you just got to reverse the logic, but it still works.
Yeah. Can I just nip for a quick pee? And then we'll finish off this. Then we'll do a hero of each episode, and then we'll wrap up. Is that all right? Quickly.
Certainly.
Thank you.
In the meantime, what can I cover while you're doing that? I guess the whole disappearing after you die thing, because
just honestly,
while you're on the can, I'll fill the airtime with that.
You can do. Yeah, Eric. Everybody, this is Eric talking without me.
Kidding.
I'm going for a pee.
Squeeze quickly. So, okay, so after all this is done, suddenly Yoda whips the "I have training for you, Obi-Wan," and reveals that Qui-Gon is, in fact, a ghost and has been for 13 years, chronologically speaking. Obviously, they go into this in the Clone Wars. God, do they go into it in the Clone Wars. And obviously, I made a big deal out of it because I'm doing this Force portrait project that I've talked about and we'll probably talk more about further along we go. That's wonderful and beautiful and lovely material, though. And so I really would recommend you guys go and seek it out if you haven't seen it. The very last arc of what, for another few months at least, will be the very last season of the show. It's not on Netflix now. They just got it off. But if you have some way of watching it, do try. And it probably will be on Disney Plus in a matter of, well, months, I would say. But as I say, last we left Qui-Gon, he was dying in Phantom Menace, and had clearly already learned this trick, but he didn't learn it entirely because that's why he never appeared as a blue ghost. But he is able to appear as a voice and affect Yoda in Episode 2 when he's in deep meditation. And then on the Clone Wars, he shows up in a bit more tangible form and learns some spiritual tricks. And bada boom, ghosts. Now, how does that play into the rest of the saga? One thing I can tell you is this, just to have something to say until Alex gets back. The original drafts of Return of the Jedi have Obi-Wan coming back from the Netherworld not as a ghost, but as a flesh and blood living person again to help Luke out of the jam at the great battle at the end. So if they want to bring Luke back as a living being and not as a blue glowy in Episode 9, the precedent is there. In fact, I would argue that the title The Rise of Skywalker really hints that that might very well be the case. But now that Alex is back, we can get the train of thought back on the rails.
I'm sorry about that. It was one of those peas that just kept on coming.
When you gotta, you gotta. I just was covering the whole now you should train under Qui-Gon's ghost bit and what that means for the later saga. So Yoda learned it from Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon communed with Obi-Wan remotely to teach him how to do it, which is why he does it in Episode 4. At some point, they obviously teach Luke how to do it, but we'll get to that.
We've never seen a Sith Force ghost, though, have we?
As far as George is concerned, that can't happen. At least they may. That's been the case up until now. Who knows what they'll say in order to justify the fact that Palpatine may be in Episode 9. But as far as Lucas is concerned, and this is mentioned in the Clone Wars, the Sith can't come back from the dead because that requires a selflessness they don't have. Plus, they don't think that there is anything beyond the physical world.
Oh, okay.
They ask, what else is there?
It's almost
so they're not. And if they were to learn that it's to come back as a spirit that can only influence others but not do anything themselves, the Sith would want no part of that if that was the case.
Yeah. Which obviously isn't true as in Yoda's case, because in The Last Jedi he sets fires to that tree, doesn't he?
They were going to have Sith spirits in an episode of Clone Wars, but then George nixed it and says, no, Sith don't have that. That doesn't happen.
Okay,
and that's as close to canon as you're going to get, unless they change their mind. We'll see.
So, where were we? We were talking about... we were just getting to the point, actually, with Padme dying during childbirth.
Padme dies during childbirth.
Of a broken heart.
Of a broken heart. But I want you to consider this. Yeah, I poo-pooed the broken heart bit. Medically speaking, I don't know how well it flies. Except that after Carrie Fisher died, not a couple of days later, really, the mother of Princess Leia died of a broken heart.
It's extreme depression, I guess.
Debbie Reynolds died mere days after her daughter, and I therefore can't challenge dying of a broken heart anymore, because there it is. The mother of Princess Leia, in fact and in life, as well as fiction and narrative, died of a broken heart.
So, it's a horrible thing that it happened, but it's kind of poetic in a way that it happened the way it did.
Precisely. And it's solely the poetry I'm appreciating here. I'm not going, it's cool that she died at all, let alone that way. Yeah. It's just saying that, truth is stranger than fiction, and life imitates art sometimes.
Yeah. And then obviously things tie up at the end of this with Luke going to his aunt and uncle. And
with all the axes in all the walls, narratively speaking.
Yes.
With a Death Star under construction.
Mm-hmm.
And, by the way, there's a greater narrative to that than the films had time to get into either, but the new canon books eventually did, where they treat the Death Star as a kind of Manhattan Project, with Galen Erso as the Alan Oppenheimer and Orson Krennic as General Groves, I guess?
Yeah. And I was thinking about this because we've been planning this Star Wars special for such a long time that I did think, how are we going to tackle Rogue One and Solo? What we're going to do with that? I guess we'll have to think about that some other time. We can kind of snip in and kind of.
It ties in greater to the classic trilogy than it does to the prequels, except that it does have the same actors from the prequels who played Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, doing the last parts of what their characters are obligated to do in terms of story. Send Leia to go pick up Obi-Wan and have that go all seed. Yeah. And then to die.
Okay, let's do something that I originally wrote that we were going to do after each snippet.
Certainly.
We can go back and do it, okay? So episode 1, okay? I want you to pick a hero, someone that you thought shone the most through episode 1, who you appreciate the most.
Well, aside from the fact that Palpatine is just a fascinating character to watch, and it's fascinating to watch him do what he does, and if you're looking at it with a certain level of insight in order to understand what he's doing, it's really compelling. In terms of the ethics of the character, Thomas Mann said about Hitler, the man is a disaster as a phenomenon and as a person, but that's no reason we shouldn't find him interesting.
Yeah. But
in terms of characters that are heroic, I'd go with Qui-Gon. Because in the end, Qui-Gon is representative of the spirit of the Jedi of old that the Jedi Order of that time have clearly lost.
Yeah,
and that Luke essentially picks up with the adoption of a green saber and a green way of looking at things. A Qui-Gon way of looking at things.
I would agree with you. I think Qui-Gon for me for episode 1 was definitely my MVP.
Qui-Gon was always mindful. He'd never be put into a situation where he'd do something bad and then go, what am I doing?
Yeah. It's just that initial moment when he first meets Darth Maul for me. It's one of those things that goes up on the hairs up on the back of your neck when everybody's like, oh my god, there's a Sith, and Qui-Gon's is how wise he is, and
it's a great contrast of character too, because at the end fight, Qui-Gon's all chill. He meditates until the gates open. Meanwhile, Darth Maul paces back and forth like a caged panther.
Yeah.
And really, it's the clash between aging hippie, tattooed freak.
Yeah, I guess. And out of 100, what would you give? We haven't got Tom here at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to message him and see what he would give it. But what would you give episode 1 out of 100 percentage?
Episode 1 has aged with a lot more grace than we expected at the time. And I have said, and will continue to say, that episode 2 is the one where there's really actual flaws in the story making and filmmaking.
Especially with CGI. The CGI was just dog shit in that film.
Well, really, the problem I have with episode 2 is that George, at a very late stage in the game, decides to do this factory sequence. Obi-Wan's going to kill the very one you mentioned, where they're running around in the droid-making factory, which took up a lot of effects, time, resources, and I think ended up kind of hamstringing the last third of the film. Yeah. It's part of why there's so much music moved around from other parts of the film and other films, because John Williams probably wasn't given the time he needed to do the score to the level of justice we would expect. The effects were kept on a delay because all the ancillary materials, the magazines, the storyboards, don't show any of the effects from the last battle on Geonosis in episode 2 because I think they just didn't have the time to render them in time to get these books printed out and put on the shelves in time. They were held up by this factory sequence. Now, I may not at all be right, but I suspect that I am. Now, with regard to episode 1, I don't think those same technical problems are there. It's very much the film George wanted to make. It wasn't compromised or hamstrung by late-made decisions. The music was the way he wanted it. Editing structure was the way he wanted it. Everything was the way he wanted it, and I see an actual film there. So I would rank, if we're going to talk about scoring, episode 3 is the best of the 3. Episode 1 is the second best. And episode 3 is, in my opinion, the least good of the 3.
I would absolutely agree. That is exactly how I would put it. And do you know what? I really do thank you for saying that, because episode 1 obviously has been given a lot of grief over the years. And like episode 2... it, like you said, it was a filler. It was kind of the in-betweeny. You know, it was kind of a lot of things that had to happen. And
well, he had to marry Padme at some time. Palpatine had to get emergency powers sometime. The Clone Wars had to start sometime. It's not entirely filler. It's just the in-between, and you just want it to get to the events that you heard about in exposition form in episode 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Episode 2 was, who would be your MVP for episode 2?
I'm
gonna
say Dooku. Remember, Dooku really is a character that hasn't been mined properly, and there's a lot of actual meat there. Dooku is very much what Anakin might have been had Lucas stayed to his original notes. A kind of guy who became a Sith while still being a Jedi, killing other Jedi behind the scenes in such a way that his fellow Jedi don't understand that it's him and won't accept that it's him because he's this famous Jedi. Why would he do that? How would he do that?
Yeah, I would agree. Because
and meanwhile, the motivation for Anakin's turn was later made more personal, but he kept it and grafted it onto Dooku, and for him, it works.
I like, even though for me, like it was it's kind of obvious that there was something not right with Dooku from a Jedi's perspective. I like Christopher Lee. I think he's such an amazing actor, and he played evil perfectly, and there's so much depth in that, you know. There was almost a really sinister way about him, you know, and I really do like, I mean, when the first time I ever watched Obi-Wan and Anakin go against him, I was fearing for their lives, forgetting the fact that, you know, Obi-Wan is obviously not going to die, he's in A New Hope, and Anakin is, you know, it was one of those moments where you just didn't know what was going to happen, and that was because of how sinister he played the part.
Christopher Lee brings a lot of material to the performance that isn't there on the page.
Yeah. Adds a bit more character to it.
And definitely you learn more about Dooku during the Clone Wars series, although I maintain not nearly enough. There's so much more better material there. His fall from grace is equally fascinating. Yeah. And it's something that happened, God knows when, between episodes 1 and 2, before episode 1, most likely. God knows how. But I can't wait to find out how. Eventually they'll get to that story.
Exactly. Yes. And we'll find out why he became such a naughty boy. Episode 3, finally, MVP for you.
Now, in episode 3, there's no contest. The most valuable player clearly is Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine.
You and me
enjoying the day when
here.
Everything's coming up Palpatine.
Yeah.
When everything is going his way, and the films very much do illustrate what the novelizations and other little bits of material said decades ago. It says that through fraud, clever promises, and astute political maneuvering, he became chancellor, even though they didn't call it that at the time. Yeah. And then through subterfuge, bribery, and terror, he named himself emperor. And we see that very much play out. Yeah. He comes to power in an elaborately rigged election, which is such a fraud that no one in amongst the participants is aware that it's a fraud except Palpatine.
Yeah, and
terror, subterfuge, bribery. We see all those.
It's the switch between, like we said, the aristocratic kind of really kind of pompous kind of get him away from me kind of, then to the nasty, horrible. That switch for me is really clever. You know, it's
another part of the literary convention I go about, where they do the aside to the audience. I'm evil. These other people on the stage with me don't know it because they're thick as rocks.
The twisting of the moustache, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, we're so much in agreement with this. It's crazy. Obi-Wan actually annoyed me through that because he almost played the part like a traveling Bible salesman. He's kind of like, you need to follow the ways of the Lord, otherwise you'll go to hell. And then at the end, he's like, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and show you what for, you little nincompoop, you know.
But you notice what that says about him, that he's the doctrinaire Jedi, that the Jedi religion, as far as he's concerned, is fine for him and it should be fine for everybody. And it doesn't occur to him that it's not meeting the needs of people around him, people like Anakin.
Yeah.
It doesn't occur to him to do what Qui-Gon does. He's very much if you would just follow the code, you would be on the council. Yeah. It's Qui-Gon that's the rebel.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan's the conformist who follows the right-hand path.
Am I right in saying that Obi-Wan's
Qui-Gon is the left-hand path.
Am I right in saying that Obi-Wan's quite a shady character, though? Because someone was pointing out that maybe there might have been something. I don't know if it's a rumor. I don't know if you can but there may have been something going on between him and Padme, or that he might have had a squeeze. Maybe I don't know. Like, there's something shady about Obi-Wan that doesn't quite.
The Clone Wars actually spells that out, that he had something like a romantic attachment, and the point of that, I'm quite sure, is to again provide contrast of character. How does Obi-Wan react to the loss of things that are valued to him? How does he react to walking away from people he cares about and loves because there's a higher ideal at stake? Quite differently than Anakin, it turns out, but in a way that's equally, if not more, moving.
Yeah, he's definitely.
In the end, Obi-Wan is capable of the selflessness that Anakin just wasn't.
Yeah. You know, he was the White Knight at the end, wasn't he? But you know what? This has been I mean, the prequels, people always sneer at. They're always like, yeah, you've got to watch the prequels, and they get a lot. Sorry, I'm a bit drunk now. There's a lot of I wouldn't say hate. I dare say definitely hate for episode 1. But I don't think it deserves that, especially if it, like you were saying, we were saying at the beginning of this, you haven't gone back and looked at the source material, and if you did that, if you did go back and read the books, which I haven't, you and Tom have, then...
Well, I'd like to stress to you that reading the books is not reading the source material from which this stuff is derived. It's merely add-on material.
Okay.
As far as Lucas is concerned, these films and the TV episodes, that's set in stone. And everything else wasn't. All we can do is go back to his early writings, his early notes, which are available in the making of books that Jonathan Rinsler wrote, and which I do sometimes work from or read from. But I think when we talk about going to the source material, all I'm trying to do is say that as much as we like to tell ourselves that what we're watching deviates from some kind of expected or anticipated norm, that's not the case. Star Wars isn't a deviation from isn't being a deviation from some ideal. It's being what it is, and we're just having to adjust to the fact that it is being what it is. Also, we've had 40 years now to come to terms with the fact that Star Wars can be many different kinds of stories. It can be hard war narrative. It can be a courtroom drama. It can be a political thriller. It can be comedy. It can be a romance.
Yeah.
It can be it could be so many things. It could be a submarine drama. There was one Clone Wars episode that was meant to be just that, a kind of submarine warfare type of knockoff. Star Wars can be a lot of stories now.
It is what...
But we've had to come to terms with the fact that it isn't going to be just three things that are never open to recontextualizing or questioning.
And what I will stress as well is the fact that just because someone likes an episode or a version of Star Wars that you don't like, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. These movies are what they are to the individual, and that's it.
Indeed. And all I can do, and all you can do, is say, okay, this is what this means for me. That's, by the way, what you're meant to do with art appreciation. Even if you don't like the art you're appreciating, you're meant to go, okay, this is how I'm seeing this. Did what I'm seeing work for me? This is what I might have done differently. It's part of the conversation between the artist and the viewer of the art.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of art, Erik, at the end of this, would you like to give like your services a plug? Because I know you take commissions and you're looking for people to take part in what you're doing. So if there was ever an opportunity for people to kind of know what you're about and how they can get hold of you for whatever they need to, this would be it.
Oh, I appreciate it very much. My website, which is the best place to start, is www.cygnusartsinc.com. CYGNUSARTSINC.com. And yes, I do accept commissions and all sorts of stuff for illustrations, portraits, logo design, a lot of stuff. Also, there's a couple of other things I'd certainly like to plug. Sign up for the Ralph Report while you're thinking about doing something. Because God bless him, I wouldn't be in this position doing this at all if he, as I like to constantly say, chose to buy my work for Kevin Smith when he didn't have to.
Yeah.
And which I'll always be grateful for. So, yes, give Ralph some of your time, your patronage, and your money, folks.
We wouldn't have met if it wasn't for Ralph, and the Gami. So I really do appreciate him because, you're a good friend, Erik, and I love that we can keep in touch. What I will say is... what was I going to say? Fuck. That was a Tom moment, absolutely.
Well, one last plug to put in,
yes,
if I may be allowed, is... I through the friendships we were able to get together, I arranged to have one of my pieces auctioned and have the proceeds donated to the Wayne Foundation.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Which is a charity co-founded by Kevin, designed and intended to help fight human trafficking and help the victims thereof. So if you're in a giving mood, and you want to do some good, as I am trying to with what energies I have, give to the Wayne Foundation. They could use your help.
Absolutely. I'm pretty
sure. And it's a good cause.
It is a good cause because I think it's one of those things that kind of like, let's not talk about that on the news because, it doesn't exist, but it does. And the Wayne Foundation does a lot to help people that have been affected by that. So you should definitely look into that. You were at the beginning of the episode, we were kind of joking about you being world renowned, but you are, sir. Everybody, I've got so many people messaging me now because I put like a little thing up saying what's coming up on the on Thorskin a couple of weeks ago, and people are like, I can't wait to hear that Erik Pflueger come on our show because people love you, man, and obviously, if it wasn't for the power of like podcasting, Ralph Garman, Kev Smith, you wouldn't have that. But you do have it, sir, and you're a brilliant guy, and I'm absolutely privileged to know you. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
The privilege is very much mine. Oh, I guess I should add parenthetically that if you want to get a copy of the coloring book, you can do so at a nice low price at Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash website, which is jayandsilentbob.com. Failing that, I hope that everybody that got one during the UK tour really enjoys it. And I'm glad they're finding fulfillment in it. And the fact that they are, and that it is bringing joy to people, very much brings a thunderstruck and humble joy to me.
I couldn't get one. I'm afraid. I only came up with like coppers and brass, and I was kind of like, can I have an Erik Pflueger portrait, please? And that's what I've got. I'm looking for a frame. It's actually in my car at the moment. Usually it's like on my fridge right here where I can see it, but I want to get a frame for it because it's signed by Kevin and Ralph, and it's an Erik Pflueger, so I want to get it on my wall. My wife is like, have you asked Erik about a portrait yet? I was like, when I've got some money, I will definitely ask Erik about the portrait of the family. But wait till we get some money. So that's going to be my next purchase is an Erik Pflueger portrait. So
I'll be on hot standby for when you're ready.
we will. Erik, thank you so much for covering these episodes with me. We will be back for part 2, which will be the original trilogy. We'll probably do it next month at some point. But this has been brilliant. I'm sorry Tom couldn't sit through the whole episode. He had family shit to deal with, and I know he's going to be kicking himself. But I guess he'll be relishing getting hold of the juicy episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Well, I can't wait to hear how this sounds, and I can't wait to hear what people think of it. I hope I brought my A game to this. I still think there's even more and better. I need to cover midichlorians to some detail that I haven't been able to do here. You think I would have for this trilogy, but we've got time, and we will get there.
I think you can tell definitely the episodes that I definitely like. Episode 2, I'm kind of like, episode 1, I'm kind of like, yeah, I know quite a bit about that. Episode 3, I'm like, bam, 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 because that's my episode. I love that film so much. But yes, you did. You brought facts up that I had no idea about. So you've done me a service, sir, and everybody else that's going to listen to this. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very, very welcome.
So let's sign off. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I know it's been a long one, but it was meant to be. It was meant to be one of those episodes you can just sit back with a glass of port and relax to with the crackling of the fire. And I hope you enjoyed it. Again, thank you,
6
Erik.
hours later.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us earlier. He had to shoot earlier on, but thank you very much for joining me. And Erik, you are an absolute legend, and I love you so much. Thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome, sir.
Okay, guys, peace out. Thank you very much. May the force be with you.
Hi, are you still awake? Are you still? Wow, what a show that was! I mean, we designed these shows so that you could sit with a glass of whiskey or what have you, with the sound of the crackling fire, and enjoy what you're about to hear. And I think we achieved that with this Volume 1. Erik is just amazing. The Hayden Christensen thing is just... That was a revelation for me, because I, like everyone else, always thought of Hayden Christensen as this wooden actor. But when you break down that voice and you listen to the sort of how Hayden sort of backwards engineered that voice into sounding like something like Vader would sound like, that is the brilliance of Erik Pflueger. And I hope you enjoyed it. We'd love, like I said at the beginning, I'd love to hear any comments that you've got. Hit us up on Facebook, drop us an email, whatever you want to do. I'd love any corrections as well. I think Erik did pick up on a few corrections that he'd made on the next episode. But if you hear any more, drop us a line. You can now catch us up on our website, which is made for us by our friends at Web Orchard. We have all of our audio is going to be slowly being put on there at the moment as we speak. We're catching up, but it's a beautiful looking website. It's at usuknetwork.com, and you can play all of our audio. You can get in touch with us and just have a peruse and read about all of your hosts. Thank you again, Erik, for this. Thank you, Tom. And we are going to be moving along with these. We already have Volume 2, Episodes 1, 2, and 3, which is going to be A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. They will be available. Make sure you take a listen to them too. And then we're going to be moving on to the sequels. The sequels are obviously highly controversial, but Erik has been writing for about a year to try and make sure he's got everything he needs for this. So it's going to be spectacular. We're going to start recording them very soon. Give Erik some support, write in and give him some suggestions. We love that. So until next time, guys, may the force be with you. Peace out.